Chapter 1559. Where did you learn this swordsmanship? With several bloody wounds on his body, sect leader Tong Tian looked at Gohan in shock. At the same time, he asked Gohan in a voice that was squeezed out of his teeth. "Didn't I say that this is a swordsmanship I created myself?" Gohan said lightly. "Nonsense. This swordsmanship is so profound that it has even merged with the Great Way. How could it be created by a mere human like you?" Sect leader Tong Tian gritted his teeth and said, "By the way, this must be my master's swordsmanship. My master created this swordsmanship and passed it to you later, right?" The master that sect leader Tong Tian mentioned was, of course, ancestor Hong Jun. Sect leader Tong Tian's words also indicated that sect leader Tong Tian couldn't create such a swordsmanship by himself. He could only use it on ancestor Hong Jun, who was much more powerful than him, to convince sect leader Tong Tian. "I created this swordsmanship myself. As for whether you believe it or not, I don't care." A cold light flashed in Gohan's eyes. "Then," he said, "I just showed you the first 5 moves of the Chaos Swordsmanship. There are a total of 7 moves in the Chaos Swordsmanship. Master, please try the 6th move." Even though sect leader Tong Tian had cultivated for tens of millions of years, he could not help but feel frightened after hearing Gohan's words. Sect leader Tong Tian could not bear the first 5 moves. He did not know whether he could handle it at all. But at this moment, sect leader Tong Tian had no choice but to deal with it. He pulled himself together and used all his skills to the highest realm. He stared at the sword in Gohan's hand and was ready to receive Gohan's 6th move. However, in the next second, the Qingping sword, which had been in Tong Tian's sight just now, suddenly disappeared from his sight. Tong Tian entered a state of extreme vigilance. He wrapped himself with fragments of his consciousness and waited vigilantly for the Qingping sword, which might appear at any time. In the end, sect leader Tong Tian waited for more than 10 seconds, but the sword did not disappear until the Qingping sword returned to Gohan's hand again. "What's going on?" Sect leader Tong Tian was puzzled. The Qingping sword disappeared from Gohan's hand inexplicably and returned to Gohan's hand inexplicably for more than 10 seconds. Sect leader Tong Tian could not believe it. Moreover, Gohan had just said that this was the 6th move of the Chaos Swordsmanship. With the first 5 moves as the foundation, sect leader Tong Tian thought that the 6th move must be an extremely powerful swordsmanship. Unexpectedly, the whole process was so simple. "What are you playing? Are you making fun of me?" Sect leader Tong Tian suddenly felt annoyed. Gohan was clearly making fun of him. He did not use the 6th move at all. He simply made the Qingping sword disappear to make fun of him. The Tong Tian sect leader could not tolerate such a playful attitude. "Master, you're too serious. I wouldn't dare to make fun of you even if I was 100 times more courageous." Gohan looked at the Qingping sword in his hand and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Master. That sword will arrive soon." "What the hell is this?" When sect leader Tong Tian was still thinking about the meaning of this sentence, his body could not help but lean forward. His intact abdomen was torn open, and endless golden blood gushed out of the wound. Sect leader Tong Tian was in a trance and directly knelt in the air. "Sure enough, it will arrive soon." A wry smile flashed across sect leader Tong Tian's face. He no longer had to think about what Gu Han meant when she said she would be here soon, because the sword had already arrived. It crossed the distance of time and space and directly pierced through his abdomen. "Your sword actually crossed the distance between time and space. Oh my God, is there such a swordsmanship in the world?" Sect leader Tong Tian murmured in disbelief. Gohan was right. Gohan had indeed stabbed the 6th move just now. However, the sword did not immediately stab sect leader Tong Tian. Instead, it crossed the distance between time and space and finally fell on sect leader Tong Tian more than 10 seconds later. This was also the reason why nothing happened when sect leader Tong Tian saw Qingping's sword disappear and return. This was because the sword finally fell on him more than 10 seconds later. This caught sect leader Tongtian off guard, and he took this fatal sword head-on. Crossing time and space was not a rare ability. Many Yuan Ko had this ability. In fact, if sect leader Tongtian wanted to, he could also let some people cross time and space to go to the past or the future. This was not impossible. However, it was different from the usual situation where the stronger one was, the easier it was to do it. The stronger one was, the harder it was to travel through time and space. With sect leader Tongtian's ability, it was very easy for him to send an ordinary human to the past or the future. However, if he wanted to send himself to the past or the future, it was impossible. Because to the entire world, traveling through time and space was something that broke the rules of the world. The world would instinctively resist such a thing from happening. If someone or something was forcefully sent to the past or the future, they would have to bear the backlash of the world. The strength of this backlash was determined by the strength of the person who traveled through time and space. The stronger a traveler was, the greater the counterforce of the world would be. If someone like sect leader Tongtian wanted to travel through time and space, he would have to bear the counterforce of the entire Great Way. If sect leader Tongtian could bear such a counterforce, he would be equivalent to an existence that had surpassed the Great Way. If the entire world was under his control, why would he need to travel through time and space? At this time, Gohan's strength was similar to that of sect leader Tongtian. In sect leader Tongtian's opinion, when Gohan crossed to the untainted world when he was an immortal sword, it was already the limit that the world could bear. Now that Gohan had reached the Emperor's sword level, it was absolutely impossible for him to cross time and space, not even for a minute or a second. How did Gohan's sword attack land on him after more than 10 seconds? Sect leader Tongtian looked deeply at Gohan. Although he did not ask this question, his eyes were full of doubt. People can't cross time and space, but Sword Principle can. Sword Principle is the same as Great Tao. It exists eternally in all time and space. Facing sect leader Tongtian's doubt, Gohan answered very calmly, as if he was talking about something as simple as eating and drinking. It seems that your cultivation in Sword Principle has really surpassed me. Sect leader Tongtian trembled violently when he heard Gohan's words. Then, he quickly calmed down and looked at Gohan calmly. Thank you for your praise, Master. In that case, please show me the last move of Chaos Sword Principle. Gohan shook the Qingpin sword in his hand again. You actually have a last move. Sect leader Tongtian was stunned. This sword that crossed time and space was already the limit of Sword Principle that sect leader Tongtian could imagine. At this moment, if sect leader Tongtian was asked to imagine the last sword strike of a higher realm, he really could not guess what was contained in the last sword strike given his profound knowledge and amazing realm. However, there was one thing that sect leader Tongtian was sure of. Once Gohan used this sword, it was very likely that he would die here. Good disciple, you're very good. However, I'm a little unwell now. Let me have a taste of this sword in the future. Sect leader Tongtian said. Obviously, sect leader Tongtian had made up his mind to escape from here. He did not want to fight with Gohan anymore. However, he was still firmly sealed by the immortal killing sword formation. How could sect leader Tongtian escape? Master, you'd better not waste your time. You know the power of the immortal killing sword formation as well as I do. It's impossible for you to escape from it. Gohan said very confidently. Haha, the immortal killing sword formation is indeed powerful, but it depends on who is using it. If I control the immortal killing sword formation in my peak state, I don't think I can escape from it. However, if it's just you, a kid who hasn't become a sage, there's still a chance as long as you're willing to sacrifice yourself. Sect leader Tongtian said lightly. Oh no! Hearing sect leader Tongtian's words, Gohan's expression changed instantly. He no longer wanted to act tough. Once again, he attacked sect leader Tongtian with the Qinpin sword in his hand. However, this time, sect leader Tongtian did not plan to resist at all. Instead, he took out a small mountain from his sleeve. It was the original form of Li Mountain that goddess Wudong had transformed into. Master? Have you defeated that evil disciple? When goddess Wudong found out that she was taken out by sect leader Tongtian again, she thought that sect leader Tongtian had already killed Gohan and took her out. However, when goddess Wudong opened her eyes, she found that she was still in the immortal killing sword formation. Sect leader Tongtian was seriously injured, but Gohan seemed to be intact. She was a little confused and did not know why sect leader Tongtian took her out at this time. Good disciple, this is a fake world after all. There's no need for you to stay in this world. Before goddess Wudong could understand the meaning of sect leader Tongtian's words, she felt a huge force being injected into her body out of thin air. If it was in normal times, goddess Wudong would be ecstatic when a large amount of force was injected into her body because it meant that her strength would increase greatly. However, once the power surpassed the limits of what the goddess of incongruence could endure, it was like pouring a raging river into a small stream. The goddess of incongruence was destined to meet a tragic end. Even at the moment of her death, she did not know what had happened. She was blasted apart by the violent power. Including her origin soul, all traces of her existence exploded at that moment. The power of a flood-level Yuan Ko's self-explosion caused by a massive amount of external force was extremely terrifying. Even the immortal killing sword formation began to shake violently under such a terrifying self-explosion. In the end, a gap was torn open. At the same time, the moment this gap appeared, sect leader Tongtian seized the opportunity. He risked taking another sword strike from Gohan and escaped from the gap. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Given sect leader Tongtian's ability, if he wanted to find a place to hide, Gohan would not be able to find him even if he tore the entire earth apart. Chapter 1560. Did I let him escape after all? Gohan frowned and sighed as he looked at the god-killing sword formation, which was now empty except for the extremely violent energy of the self-explosion. Gohan, let me out. I want to kill him. At this time, Gohan heard the crazy cry in the void. Gohan moved his mind and released Song Yifei, who was attacking the void crazily, by Gohan. I want to kill him. Kill him. Song Yifei, who had just run out, wanted to enter the immortal killing sword formation again. However, Gohan grabbed his shoulder and said, "That's enough. Take a closer look. Sect leader Tongtian is no longer in the immortal killing sword formation. If you rush in, you will only be killed by the violent energy inside." Gohan said to Song Yifei, "Where did he go? You have killed him, right? You have avenged Master, right?" After Song Yifei found that sect leader Tongtian had indeed disappeared in the god-killing sword formation, she immediately grabbed Gohan's collar excitedly and looked at Gohan expectantly. She hoped that Gohan could give her the answer she wanted. No, he is not dead. He has escaped. Unfortunately, Gohan finally gave Song Yifei a disappointing answer. I know. Song Yifei took a deep look at Gohan and then walked away. I know where his lair is. Sect leader Tongtian must have escaped back to his lair. I will go to his lair to catch him now. Don't go. Gohan grabbed Song Yifei back and slapped her face without hesitation. Song Yifei was stunned. If sect leader Tongtian is still in his so-called lair, I, Gohan, will cut off my head for you to kick as a ball. The most important thing now is to save Yanjing City. Follow me. Under Gohan's domineering slap and order, Song Yifei stayed where he was for a long time, and finally followed Gohan obediently. When people lose their rationality, they need someone else to give them a strong method of control. Otherwise, they will only harm others and themselves in the end. Lu Shihua, you'd better surrender obediently. There's no hope for you humans anymore. Yuan Ko, whose entire body was shrouded in black qi, spoke to Lu Shihua in a hoarse voice that carried an aura of death. His name was Satan, and he was one of the highest commanders in the Western magical beast camp. He was a desolate level Yuan Ko. In addition, 2 other desolate level Yuan Ko followed Satan. 3 desolate level Yuan Ko besieged Lu Shihua at the same time. Although Lu Shihua resisted with all his strength, he was still no match for these 3 experts. Soon, he was in great danger. The energy of his protective shield had been reduced to less than 10%. Lu Shihua's protective shield would probably be broken if the opponent used another wave of the power of rules. No, we still have hope. In the face of Satan's persuasion, Lu Shihua replied firmly without any hesitation. Hope? Are you talking about Liu Ling? Satan looked at the other side of the battlefield. Compared to Satan, that side of the battlefield was the real battlefield. There were only 3 desolate level Yuan Ko on Satan's side, but there were 6 desolate level Yuan Ko on Satan's side, and 3 of them were desolate level Yuan Ko. In terms of strength alone, the strength gathered on the other battlefield was 3 times that of Satan's. That was the battlefield that determined the fate of mankind. Liu Ling, your Liu clan is really powerful. I will never forget the scars your ancestor left on me. However, your Liu clan will end today. Let your Liu clan be buried in this city together with mankind. On that battlefield, the leader was an emperor who wore a golden dragon robe and had a glazed crown on his head. He held a luxurious golden longsword in his hand as he spoke coldly to Fleeting Ling. If one were to look closely, they would discover that the sword in this man's hand was exactly the same as the one in Fleeting Ling's hand. This sword was called the Firmament Emperor's Sword. It was the sword of the Jade Emperor, the supreme supremacy of the Haotian Golden Palace. It was also the sword of the Jade Emperor standing in front of Liu Ling. At this moment, the 2 masters of this sword were finally fighting face to face. Jade Emperor, why are you wasting your breath on this woman? Don't let me kill her. I can see that her blood is the blood of a virgin. This is the most delicious food in the world. A naked, crimson woman with a pair of wings that belonged to an unknown race spoke to Fleeting Time Ling with a lewd smile on her face. Amaterasu, the Liu clan is a hero of mankind. Don't you dare insult her. Unexpectedly, the other desolate level Yuan Ko stood on Liu Ling's side and berated the leader of the Fusang celestial system, Amaterasu God, on behalf of Liu Ling. Then, this person said to Liu Ling with a benevolent expression, "After we kill you, we will bury you according to the etiquette of nobles. You can go in peace." TSK. Gongsun Xianyuan, what Chiyu said back then was right. You are indeed a hypocritical villain. Ha, but I like it. After we finish eating these humans, do you want to come to my Takamagara? I will let you experience the true beauty of a woman, Amaterasu God said in a hoarse voice. Coupled with her extremely ugly appearance, anyone who saw her would probably vomit their last night's meal. Even looking at such a woman was the most unbearable thing in the world, let alone having sex with her. All right, then I will go to Lady Amaterasu's Takamagara for a chat, Gongsun Xianyuan said with a smile, as if he didn't mind Amaterasu God's extremely ugly appearance at all. Shameless. Liu Ling couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood when she heard these 3 people's words. At the same time, she tightened her grip on the hilt of the Emperor's Sword of Firmament. You still want to fight? Seeing Liu Ling's actions, Gongsun Xianyuan frowned and said, Your Liu family's billion sword technique is indeed powerful, but you are not Fleeting Time Calendar. You can't use the power of Fleeting Time Calendar. Moreover, even if Fleeting Time Calendar is reborn, he can't face the 6 of us at the same time. He can only rely on your dimensional barrier to resist. To tell you the truth, the 6 of us have only used 30% of our strength up until now, and you are already heavily injured. What makes you think you can continue fighting against the 6 of us? That's right. If I use this Emperor Sword of Firmament, I am indeed no match for the 6 of you. Hearing Gongsun Xuanyuan's words, Liuyan Ling smiled bitterly, but she loosened her grip on the hilt of the Emperor's Sword of Firmament. Have you finally decided to accept your fate? Seeing Liuyan Ling's actions, Gongsun Xuanyuan, who thought that she had already given up, suddenly had a change of expression. This was because after putting down the Emperor's Sword of Firmament, Liuyan Ling actually took out another sword lady. However, compared to the Emperor's Sword of Firmament, this sword lady was only a famed sword. But because of this sword lady, Gongsun Xuanyuan's expression became even more terrified than when he saw the Emperor's Sword of Firmament. This is the 3-foot sword. This is the human path sword lady's 3-foot sword. What? This is the 3-foot sword. F***ck, she actually took out this freak. Hearing the fame of the 3-foot sword, the 6 prehistoric Yuan Ko were all shocked. After a few months, the details of the battle between the humans and the 12 Zhu Wus had spread throughout the Yuan Ko world. The story of Liuyan Ling wielding the 3-foot sword and activating her human path power killing the 12 Zhu Wus one by one deeply shocked the Yuan Ko world. Everyone attack. Don't hold back anymore. We must kill this woman immediately. Otherwise, if the 3-foot sword continues to display its might, considering the hundreds of millions of lives below, I'm afraid that some of the 6 of us will die here. In fact, there was no need for Gongsun Xuanyuan to say anything. The others also understood this. The human path sword lady was the last trump card of the humans. If they were not careful, the prehistoric Yuan Kos, who were usually immortal, might really die in this damned place. However, the Yuan Kos were also aware that once the humans used the human path sword lady, it meant that the humans' last moment had arrived. The humans had been forced into a hopeless situation, and this was their last trump card. Once the human path sword lady was destroyed, the extinction of the human race would be unstoppable. The entire human race would be destroyed by their own hand. The war between the humans and the Yuan Kos that had lasted for thousands of years would finally come to an end. I don't know how many Yuan Kos I can drag down with me before I die. It's a pity that the youth that Gohan gave me with great difficulty will be wasted by me again. Liuyan Ling controlled the 3-foot sword to absorb human life force while resisting the attacks of the 6 prehistoric Yuan Kos with great difficulty. At this moment, the only thing in Liuyan Ling's mind was Gohan's image. Apart from that, she had nothing else. Cloud-cast iron. My cloud-cast iron. On top of the city wall, Song Hama let out a blood-curdling scream. The sword lady, whom he loved dearly and regarded as his bosom friend, had finally fallen in front of him. He could only watch as she smiled at him for the last time. Then, she was pressed under the body of the violent Yuanko, about to be broken into several pieces. Who can save the cloud-cast iron? I need help here, I need help here! Song Hama shouted loudly. At the same time, he looked around, hoping that the surrounding sword-bearers could help him. In the end, there were less than 10% of the humans left on the city wall. The ground was covered in blood, and only a few kittens and puppies were struggling on the city wall. Humans are destined to perish. After Song Hama discovered this painful fact, he became abnormally calm. He silently picked up a broken sword that only had half of it left. This was his spirit sword grade sword maiden, and also the first sword maiden that he had broken. You sons of B***cheese, Yuan Kos! I'll kill you all! Song Hama let out a furious roar. Then, holding the broken sword, he directly pounced on a nearby Yuan Ko's body and used all his strength to stab the broken sword into the opponent's body. Whoa! This Yuan Ko let out a cry of pain. He didn't think that those cowardly humans who could only hide behind the sword ladies would actually dare to jump out and take the initiative to fight back. As a result, this unlucky Yuan Ko died under Song Hama's broken sword. However, this seemed to be Song Hama's final moment. Following the angry roars of the surrounding Yuan Kos, 4 or 5 Yuan Ko's simultaneously pounced on Song Hama, intending to tear him into pieces. Is today the end of my life? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have been so distracted when I was learning the sword with Gohan. This was Song Hama's final thought as he sensed his limbs being gnawed off by Yuanko and felt his heart being dug out. Chapter 1561. What are you thinking about? Do you really want to die? The dying Song Hama barely heard a familiar voice. Then, she saw the ferocious Yuan Ko turn into nothingness in an instant. These Yuan Kos were like water vapor, like a mirage. They all dissipated in a breath's time. Guhan. No. His Majesty Hongjun. When Song Hama saw a blurry figure, his mind was completely cut off and he fainted. Sigh, I've dragged it out for too long. Gohan carefully put the last bit of Song Hama's body into the Immortal Sword medical pod. With the Immortal Sword medical pod and Gohan, Song Hama could come back to life as long as there was a little bit of her soul left. Therefore, Gohan was not worried about Song Hama's life. However, there were too many sword bearers who had encountered the same fate as Song Hama. After Yuan Ko's death, their bodies would disappear from this world. However, after the sword bearers died, their corpses would be left in this world. Their blood would also stain the walls of Yanjing City. Therefore, when Gohan looked around, he saw mutilated corpses of humans lying on the ground, staring at the sky with soulless eyes. The entire walls were stained with red blood. It's terrible, it's really terrible. Song Yifei, who had climbed up the city wall after Gohan, was stunned when she saw everything. Then, she could not help but cover her mouth and vomit. Song Yifei had seen death before. She had seen many battles over the years. However, this was the first time in her life that she had seen such a tragic scene. Song Yifei could not help but vomit. There are humans here. Kill them. When the hundreds of Yuan Kos realized that 2 humans had suddenly appeared on the city wall, they immediately charged over aggressively with their claws and fangs bared. Among these Yuan Kos, there were powerful dragon-level Yuan Kos, the weakest mouse-level Yuan Kos, and even 1 or 2 nether-level Yuan Kos. Therefore, these hundreds of Yuan Kos naturally thought that they could easily kill these 2 humans who had suddenly appeared, just like what they had done before. These Yuan Kos, who seemed very powerful in the eyes of most sword-bearers, were just a joke to Gohan. With a wave of his hand, a wave of sword chi swept past, and these aggressive Yuan Kos dissipated like mist. Only the dimensional vortex still proved that they once existed. Although these hundreds of Yuan Kos were easily killed by Gohan, it was just a drop in the bucket. There were at least 100,000 Yuan Kos on the city wall, and below the city wall, endless Yuan Kos were still climbing up. A rough estimate showed that there were at least 3 million Yuan Kos under the city wall, ready to go. For humans, this was a number that was impossible to defeat. Gohan, let's do it. Kill all these guys. Song Yifei was already done. Her body was burning with anger, and she was ready to kill these damn Yuan Kos. Wait. Gohan stopped Song Yifei, who was ready to rush up and fight with the Yuan Kos, and sighed. You're just an immortal sword wielder now. Even if your strength is superior, how many can you kill in the face of millions of Yuan Kos? What do you mean by that? Do you think I'll just stand by and watch? Song Yifei said, gritting his teeth. Of course not. I have a better way to deal with these damn beasts. A cold light flashed in Gohan's eyes, and this cold light made Song Yifei feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. These Yuan Kos are finished. They're all dead. Song Yifei looked around at the densely packed Yuan Kos, who were still showing off and thinking that they had won. He muttered to himself, as if these Yuan Kos would all die in an instant. Luckily, the quantum network is still working. Gohan looked down at his personal terminal, and when he saw that the quantum signal bar was still full, he smiled viciously. Everyone, hold on. Don't break away from the formation. Everyone, hold on. Our loved ones are right behind us. We can't take a step back. The sword immortal of the Gui Hall yelled at the people around him. Actually, even without the sword immortal of Gui Hall's encouragement, these swordsmen wouldn't retreat. This was because they had nowhere else to go. If they retreated now, the entire human race would perish, and they would die as well. Only 1,000 people left. Sigh, I wonder how many of these 1,000 people will make it back alive. The sword immortal of Gui Hall sighed as he looked at the swordsmen below him while he fought with a few universe-grade yuan ko's. At this time, the human defense line that covered the entire city wall had collapsed. The remaining swordsmen could only form small areas on the city wall with the sword immortal level bearers as the core. These were the last areas on the city wall that were occupied by humans. With the sword immortal level bearers doing their best to resist and protect the humans, the remaining swordsmen were barely able to maintain their defense line. There were more than 20 areas on the city wall with sword immortal level bearers as the core, and each area had about 1,000 sword immortal level bearers. These were the last remaining swordsmen of the human race, and there were less than 20,000 of them in total. Apart from these sword bearers, there were still sword bearers like Song Hama who could not find the protection of an immortal sword-wielding sword bearer, but the number of such sword bearers was too small, and they were constantly dying off. Soon, there were only 20 or so immortal sword-wielding sword bearers left on the city walls. However, this was also only temporary, because every sword immortal level bearer was simultaneously attacked by a few or even a dozen universe-grade yuan ko's. These sword immortal level bearers might not even be able to last 10 minutes. In fact, in just a short 3 minutes, the sword immortal of Gui Hall's personal terminal had already received the final wills of 8 sword immortal level bearers. The publication of these wills represented the death of these sword immortal level bearers. With the death of the sword immortal level bearers, it was only a matter of time before all the human sword immortal level bearers died. In fact, it was only a matter of time before all the sword immortal level bearers died. Take the sword immortal of Gui Hall for example. There was less than 10% of the sword essence left in his body. According to his own estimation, under the most optimistic circumstances, he could only last for another 2 minutes. All right, I'll be able to see my father in 2 minutes, the sword immortal of Gui Hall thought to himself. At this moment, he had no hesitation. Beep beep beep. At this moment, the sword immortal of Gui Hall's personal terminal started beeping again. This kind of beeping made the sword immortal of Gui Hall feel extremely annoyed. In the past, when this beeping sound was heard, it meant that a sword immortal level bearer had written a will and left this world forever. It seemed that another sword immortal level bearer had left this world. Although he was extremely unwilling to see such a will, the sword immortal of Gui Hall finally took the time to look at his personal terminal. It only took one look. Just one look, and the sword immortal of Gui Hall's entire temperament instantly underwent a huge change. His original temperament of fighting to the death disappeared without a trace in an instant. In its place was a joyful temperament, a joy that was filled with sunshine. This kind of joy even affected the other sword immortal level bearers who were protected by the sword immortal level bearers. This was because the change in the sword immortal of Gui Hall was too great. They could not help but notice the huge change in the sword immortal of Gui Hall's emotions. What's happening? Is there some good news? Just as this thought popped up in everyone's mind, the sword immortal of Gui Hall shouted in the air, "All sword maidens on the perimeter, enter defensive mode. Do not let a single yuan ko enter our defensive line. All sword immortal level bearers who have lost their sword maidens but are still in good condition, please help up your injured and immobile companions immediately. Pick up all the broken swords you have collected and prepare to retreat through the gate of the void." The sword immortal of Gui Hall spoke very quickly and loudly. His instructions were also very clear. Therefore, all the sword immortal level bearers immediately knew the sword immortal of Gui Hall's order to retreat. However, Everyone could not help but feel puzzled. What was going on? Why were they retreating? Where could the humans retreat to? With this question in mind, one of the Sword Immortal level bearers immediately asked, "Sword Immortal of Gui Hall, please tell us. What are we talking about? If we retreat, what about the hundreds of millions of our people behind us?" "That's right. If we retreat, what about our people?" Everyone asked the same question. If it were not for the sake of protecting the humans behind them, many of the Sword Immortal level bearers would have chosen to escape. It was precisely because of the existence of these humans that they needed to protect that these Sword Immortal level bearers were willing to sacrifice themselves to fight. These humans had become the core of the Sword Immortal level bearers' belief in continuing to fight, and they were willing to sacrifice their lives for this. However, at this moment, the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall was asking them to retreat. What about their people behind them? Were they going to let Yuan Ko kill them? "There's no time to talk. Retreat now." The Sword Immortal of Gui Hall did not explain. Instead, he directly opened a void door in the center of the area. To the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall, this was already an overload. Under normal circumstances, a Sword Immortal level Sword Immortal would need to expend a lot of energy to open a void door. At this moment, the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall was fighting with 4 or 5 Universe Realm Yuan Ko at the same time. 90% of his energy was used to deal with what was happening on the battlefield. Being able to use 10% of his energy to open a void door was already an overload. Therefore, the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall did not have the energy to explain anything to these Sword Immortals. He could only ask them to quickly retreat through the void door. "We're not leaving. We're going to die here." "That's right. Sword Immortal of Gui Hall, leave if you're afraid. We're going to live and die with our people. My parents are right behind me. I'm not leaving." Countless Sword Immortals shouted loudly. This was a very touching scene. In the face of a life and death crisis, so many Sword Immortals actually expressed in unison that they would rather give up their lives to protect their people behind them. This was indeed a very noble spirit that was worthy of praise and praise at any time. However, at this moment this became a very bad thing. Faced with the crowd that was unwilling to enter the void door, the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of black blood. He was attacked by the enemy Yuan Ko a few more times. Finally, he shouted with the last of his energy, "You don't believe me, but do you not believe His Majesty Hong Jun?" Chapter 1562. His Majesty Hong Jun? What? Is this an order from His Majesty Hong Jun? That's great. Is His Majesty Hong Jun finally back? After hearing the Sword Immortal of Ming Hall's words, the crowd that had been resisting entering the Void Gate finally loosened up. The sword bearers who had lost their sword maidens were the first to carry the wounded and enter the Void Gate. This became a signal for more and more sword bearers to follow them into the Void Gate. The area controlled by the humans gradually shrank. In the end, when 90% of the humans had entered the Void Gate, the Sword Immortal of Ming Hall unleashed his ultimate move. He used his immense strength to temporarily force the surrounding Yuan Ko to retreat. He then dragged the remaining sword bearers who were still resisting outside and escaped into the Void Gate. This did not only happen in the area controlled by the Sword Immortal of Ming Hall. In fact, all the sword bearers received an order from the same person at the same time. Then, all the sword bearers opened the Void Gate at the same time and ordered their sword bearers to retreat into it. Some of the sword bearers entered without hesitation, but there were also some who questioned him like the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall. In the end, they were silenced by Hongjuan's name and obediently entered the Gate of the Void. It was not only the immortal sword wielders who were experiencing such a situation. The same thing was happening to the other sword wielders who were still fighting. Leslie Dracula was a genius from the same generation as Gohan. She was a genius who had feelings for Gohan and dreamed of marrying Gohan one day. After Gohan disappeared, Her immature feelings for Gohan were naturally put aside. In the end, she found an honest, reliable, and humorous man who looked similar to Gohan. They ended up having an adorable child. Unfortunately, all of these things were gone 3 years ago. Leslie Dracula was one of the last sword-bearers to retreat from Buenos Aires. She chose to fight until the end to buy enough time for her husband and child to escape. However, when Leslie Dracula finally escaped to London, she was heartlessly told that the ship her husband was on had been discovered by the Grand Wizard Xianming, who was passing by. All the humans on the ship, including the 5 true dragons of the Dragon Clan who were escorting the ship, had died at the hands of the Grand Wizard Xianming. Not a single one of them had survived. From that day on, Leslie Dracula seemed to have lost the vitality of a living person and became like a puppet. When Zhu Wu was around, she would kill Zhu Wu with all her might. When Zhu Wu was not around, she would vent her anger on Yuan Ko. It was the same in this battle. Leslie Dracula lost herself in the battle. She did not care about her back or whether she was in a trap. She just kept killing Yuan Ko. Perhaps it was because of this desperate fighting style that Leslie Dracula survived until now. The rest of the sword-bearers around her had become a pile of minced meat on the ground. However, Leslie Dracula's good luck ended here. After killing all the sword-bearers around her, the remaining Yuan Ko focused all his firepower on Leslie Dracula. Leslie Dracula was only a spirit sword-bearer at this time, and the sword essence in her body had been exhausted. Therefore, even though she was full of anger, and even though Leslie Dracula's will was not weak, she was still pounced on by Yuan Ko, just like Song Hama just now. However, Leslie Dracula was much luckier than Song Hama. Song Hama was bitten by Yuan Ko until only half of her body was left. However, when Leslie Dracula's body was about to be torn to pieces by Yuan Ko, all the Yuan Ko around her disappeared like mist. Then, a hand appeared from the void and directly drilled into the void. "Darling, I see you again." Looking at the face in front of her, which was 40 to 50% similar to her husband's, Leslie Dracula said without emotion. At this time, Gohan did not care who Leslie Dracula mistook him for. After saving Leslie Dracula, he immediately rushed to the next location and directly dragged the sword-bearers who were fighting alone there into the void. In addition to Gohan, Song Yifei was also doing the same thing. After ensuring that the sword-bearers they were responsible for protecting had entered the void, the immortal sword-bearers immediately dispersed and, like Gohan and Song Yifei, dragged the scattered sword-bearers who were still fighting on the city wall into the void. With the addition of more than 20 immortal sword-bearers, the remaining sword-bearers on the wall soon disappeared from Yuan Ko's sight. The city wall, which the Yuan Ko had been fighting hard for more than 20 minutes, was finally completely under Yuan Ko's control at this moment. The Yuan Ko could finally look below the other side of the city wall, where hundreds of millions of delicious humans were tempting their taste buds. Very good. At the same time, on a higher level of the battlefield, Gongsun Xianyuan received the report from his subordinates immediately. He smiled at Liuyan Ling and said, "Miss Ling, it seems that you humans are finished. The entire city wall has been occupied by us, and the rest are just a bunch of live targets. Miss Ling, we have won." Liuyan Ling did not say anything. She just lowered her head and glanced at the city wall. She found that all the human territories that were barely holding on had disappeared without a trace. The entire city wall area had indeed been occupied by Yuan Ko. Seeing this, Liuyan Ling felt her head turn black. Before she could catch her breath, the 2 Yuan Ko around her seized the opportunity to attack Liuyan Ling's personal shield fiercely, causing Liuyan Ling's personal shield to tremble. "I'll fight you to the death." Seeing that the city wall had been completely lost, Liuyan Ling, who thought that humans had reached the end of the road and could no longer be saved, finally decided to use her own life to sing a final sad song for humans. She, Liuyan Ling, did not want this life anymore. She must drag a few Yuan Ko down with her. Just as Liuyan Ling had this thought in her mind, her personal terminal sounded a melodious sound. Apart from the standard beeping sound, the personal terminal could also be set to different caller tones for different people. This melodious sound belonged to a voice that had a special place in Liuyan Ling's address book. He's finally back. Liuyan Ling's heart warmed up. She immediately looked at her personal terminal. Then, she felt refreshed in an instant. She had already taken out the 3-foot sword, but at this moment she put it back. No. This woman isn't right. Gongsun Xianyuan keenly sensed the change in Liuyan Ling, but he did not have time to carefully think about why Liuyan Ling would change like this. At this moment, in the last area of the core area of Yanjing City, huge void doors the size of city walls opened at the same time. If this was the first time this void gate appeared, any human who saw it would definitely feel doubtful and fearful instinctively. Even if Yuenko's butcher's knife was right in front of them, they might not be able to get through the gate in such a neat and tidy manner. But fortunately, this was not the first time these huge void doors had appeared. 3 months ago, these void doors had also appeared. Then, all the survivors spent the safest period of their lives in these void doors. The memories of these void doors were still fresh in the minds of humans. Therefore, without any hesitation or even without Gohan taking the initiative to give the order, the survivors rushed into the void doors in unison after seeing these void doors. Without any hesitation, 200 million humans rushed into the void doors like a tide. In less than a minute, all the survivors in the entire core area except for a few individuals had disappeared in the core area. At this moment, the first wave of Yuan Ko rushed down from the city wall. They, who were about to start a massacre, looked at the empty core area blankly. They had no idea what was going on here. What is this? How can there be such a huge void door? This is impossible. Gongsun Xuanyuan's jaw dropped when he saw the scene before him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In fact, it was not just Su Gongsun Xianyuan. All the Yuan Ko, including the prehistoric ones, were dumbfounded at this scene. I remember now. According to Qianli Yan's report, these huge void doors appeared during the Battle of the 12 Zhu Wu in Yuzhong City. This is that man's unique skill. That man has returned. The Jade Emperor suddenly shouted. At this moment, another small void door opened directly above the core area. Under the gaze of all the prehistoric Yuan Ko, a man walked out of this void door. At the same time, 4 long swords shining with golden light floated to Gohan's side. In the enclosed area formed by these 4 long swords, rays of colorful light were constantly colliding with each other as if some ferocious beast was imprisoned by these 4 long swords. What's going on? Didn't the Tongtian saint promise us that Gohan will definitely die in his hands? Gongsun Xianyuan screamed in disbelief. You have really become the lackeys of the Tongtian saint. Upon hearing Gongsun Xuanyuan's words, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Gohan's mouth. But it doesn't matter. These are gifts from the Tongtian saint. Now I will give them to you. Chapter 1563. What gift? Before Gongsun Xianyuan could react to what was happening, Gohan snapped his fingers and the 4 celestial executioners' 4 swords behind him dispersed. The moment the immortal killing sword formation formed by the 4 immortal killing swords, incongruence Divine Mother, the desolate level Yuan Bandit, self-detonated under the infusion of Saint's power by Tongtian sect. She had been trapped by the immortal killing sword formation. If one had to describe the power of the explosion, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a dozen big Ivan bundling together. It was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying power. The huge power instantly hit every prehistoric level Yuan Ko. The moment these Yuan Ko sensed the power, they revealed expressions of extreme horror. Without saying a word, they tried to open the void door and enter the void to avoid the huge power. However, when these unlucky Yuan-ko tried to open the void door, they were horrified to find that no matter how they communicated with the void, which could have been easily opened in the past, was now tightly shut. It was as solid as the door of a bank vault. No matter how hard they tried, the void remained firmly fixed and motionless, not giving them a chance to open it at all. That's impossible. That human just opened such a huge void gate so easily. The universe-level Yuan-ko shouted in their hearts. However, shouting was of no use. They could only watch helplessly as the shockwave produced by the explosion of the sword formation engulfed their bodies. This guy has actually grasped the laws of the void. The universe-level Yuan-ko did not understand why the void door could not be opened, but the prehistoric-level Yuan-ko immediately knew the problem. Someone had completely grasped the laws of the void and sealed the void firmly. Unless they could also grasp the laws of the void, they would not be able to open the void door and enter the void to avoid the shocking explosion. Unfortunately, none of the prehistoric-level Yuan-ko had grasped the laws of the void. Therefore, the prehistoric-level Yuan-ko could only fully activate their defensive means and use their own power to resist the huge explosion. Fortunately, such an explosion was ultimately only a prehistoric-level Yuan-ko's explosion. Even though it was infused with sage power, it was still a prehistoric-level explosion. As such, the primitive-grade Yuan-ko was able to resist the power of the explosion with all his might, preventing himself from suffering any fatal damage until the explosion's energy dissipated. However, the other Yuan-ko were not so lucky. When Gongsun Xianyuan felt that the energy outside had weakened to a safe level, he immediately activated his shield and looked down nervously. Although he had already expected this outcome, when the real scene appeared in front of his eyes, Gongsun Xianyuan still felt a heart-wrenching despair. At this moment, in Gongsun Xuanyuan's eyes, the entire Yanjing city no longer existed. What replaced it was a huge crater that was tens of kilometers deep. This huge crater completely enveloped the original location of Yanjing city. It was so large that it could be seen clearly even from outer space. If the Earth was compared to a human face, then this huge crater would probably be a black mole on the face. Even from a distance of hundreds of meters, one could still see it clearly. If the entire Yanjing city was like this, then there was no need to talk about Yuan-ko who stayed in Yanjing city. Judging from the power of such a huge explosion, any Yuan-ko below the universe level would definitely not be able to survive such a huge explosion. As for the universe-level Yuan-ko, Gongsun Xianyuan looked around. Other than the prehistoric-level Yuan-ko in the sky, there were no other Yuan-ko. Of course, it was impossible for all the universe-level Yuan-ko to die. Perhaps some Yuan-ko were lying at the bottom of the crater, moaning and dying. Our martyr's palace, millions of troops, are gone. Gongsun Xuanyuan's expression was ashen. In order to completely wipe out the humans this time, the martyr's palace had used all of its trump cards. The millions of Yuan-ko under Pearl River pictures had all been brought outside Yanjing city. However, with this explosion, they were instantly annihilated. Such a huge loss was something the martyr's palace had never experienced in the past 1,000 years. These were the absolute elites of the martyr's palace. How many people are left in the martyr's palace? Gongsun Xianyuan couldn't help but ask himself this question, but he could only come up with a pitiful answer. After this battle, the martyr's palace might be able to gather a few million more Yuan-ko, but most of them were rat or tiger-level Yuan-ko. Excluding the trash Yuan-ko, the remaining dragon-level and above Yuan-ko numbered less than 10,000. 90% of the martyr's palace's high-end power had been completely destroyed in this explosion. How could Gongsun Xianyuan not feel despair? Gongsun Xianyuan wasn't the only one who felt despair. Amaterasu, Satan, and the Jade Emperor had all rushed here with their elite forces. Under the temptation of Tongtian's assurance that they could kill Gohan, they had wanted to completely annihilate the humans in one go. However, who would have thought that the ones to be completely annihilated weren't the humans, but themselves? This could be considered karma. They reaped what they sowed. After all, the power that destroyed all of the Yuan Ko wasn't Gohan's own power, but Tongtian's. Gohan was merely a porter. Following the death of the millions of Yuan Ko elites, the entire sky darkened in an instant. A huge dimensional vortex that covered the entire sky slowly formed. The corpses of the Yuan Ko in the deep pit floated up one by one and flew into the air before being sucked into the dimensional vortex. This dimensional vortex was probably the largest dimensional vortex in the history of the Great Calamity. The deaths of several million Yuanko bandits at the same time was something that had never happened since the Great Calamity. Oh, I can't waste them! Upon seeing the huge dimensional vortex, the corners of Gohan's mouth finally curled into a smile. Without a word, he threw all the sword ladies in his hands into the dimensional vortex. At the same time, he pulled all the sword bearers out of the void. What is this? These sword bearers who came out of the void had no idea what was happening outside. They only knew that they were forcefully pulled out of the void, and then everything that they were once familiar with was gone. In its place was a huge pit, a pit that no human dared to imagine and had never seen before. This can't be Yanjing City, right? Although they couldn't see anything that Yanjing City used to be, some of the sword-bearers who were born and raised in Yanjing City could sense that the huge pit that they were born in was their hometown, Yanjing City, based on their memories of Yanjing City that they couldn't be more familiar with and the sixth sense that came from the depths of their hearts. It was just that no one could believe that Yanjing City, which was still standing on the ground just a moment ago, had turned into a bottomless pit in just a few short minutes. This was unacceptable to them, no matter if it was in terms of character or emotion. Everyone, don't waste time. Send all your sword maidens into the dimensional vortex. Quick! These sword bearers, who were still wondering if this was Beijing City, immediately heard a loud shout. When they looked up, they realized that there was an incomparably huge dimensional vortex in the sky that they had never seen before. At the sight of such a huge dimensional vortex, all the sword-bearers were so shocked that they even forgot to take out their sword maidens. They just looked at the sky in a daze, not knowing what to do. There's no time. Don't waste the price that we humans have paid. Gohan's voice rang in their ears again. This time, the sword-bearers came back to their senses and hurriedly took out their sword maidens. Then, the sword maidens were automatically swept up by the huge suction force of the dimensional vortex and flew into it to absorb the massive amount of sword essences inside. These humans actually dare to come out. At the same time, the prehistoric Yuan Ko who saw the humans absorbing the sword essences were extremely furious. After all, the sword essences that these humans absorbed were the flesh and blood of their subordinates. Satan, who had the most fiery temper, was the first to attack. However, he didn't dare to attack Gohan in the distance. Instead, he shot out more than 10 streams of demonic chi towards the hundreds of sword-bearers around him. Faced with the attacks of the desolate-level Yuan Ko, these sword-bearers, who were at most at the famed sword level, naturally couldn't withstand it. They were about to die from Satan's sneak attack. How dare you! As soon as Satan's demonic chi shot out, he heard a roar. Then, 4 sword lights enveloped him. When the sword lights dissipated, Satan no longer existed. A brand new dimensional vortex was slowly opening and absorbing Satan's last remains. Satan died just like that. The rest of the prehistoric Yuan Ko saw Satan's death. Although they sensed that Satan was being attacked and wanted to support him, they didn't do it quickly. Or rather, they did it slowly. In their opinion, a top-notch desolate-level Yuan bandit like Satan would have no problem holding on for 10 to 20 minutes. They had never expected that Satan would not even last for 3 seconds before dying under the sword light. The fairy-slaying sword formation. That's the fairy-slaying sword formation. The Jade Emperor was like a frightened kitten. After letting out an extremely terrified scream, he immediately fled into the distant sky. In the blink of an eye, he had escaped from this place that was incomparably terrifying in his heart. What a joke! A top prehistoric Yuan-ko like Satan had died in the blink of an eye. Even if he was stronger than Satan, he would only be able to hold on for a few more seconds. The Jade Emperor didn't want to end up like Satan. Chapter 1564. What the Jade Emperor did set a very good example for the other precariousness level Yuan-ko. The rest of the precariousness level Yuan-ko did not have the courage to continue staying here. As for the subordinates of Yuan-ko who were still in the deep pit and might still be alive, these Yuan-ko did not care about them. Without saying a word, they scattered in different directions. Each of them increased their speed to the maximum, fearing that if they were a second slower, they would be caught up and killed by that terrible human being. In fact, these precariousness level Yuan-ko escaped quite thoroughly. Take the Jade Emperor and other precariousness level Yuan-ko of the Celestial Court as an example. After they escaped, they did not even return to their nest, the Celestial Court. Instead, they directly fled into the dimensional space and hid in one of the dimensional worlds. Only by hiding in the dimensional world could the Jade Emperor feel a little safe. Otherwise, if he continued to stay in the main world, he would be retaliated by that abnormal human being sooner or later. Except for some precariousness level Yuan-ko who cherished their nests very much and ran back to their nests, most of the precariousness level Yuan-ko ran into the dimensional world. In this way, all the precariousness level Yuan-ko in the main world were gone. The main world entered an era with the fewest precariousness level Yuan-ko in the past 1,000 years. Have they all run away? Seeing the primordial class Yuan bandits scatter, Gu Han, who had a cold expression on his face, trembled. Then, like a meteor, he fell into the deep pit. His body was stiff and motionless, as if he was dying of a serious illness. In fact, when fighting sect leader Tong Tian, Gohan had almost consumed all his strength. Even though sect leader Tong Tian had yet to recover from his serious injuries and was ambushed by Gu Han, he was, after all, a sage. Even under the immortal slaying sword formation, he could still fight evenly with Gu Han. In the end, Gohan was forced to use the Chaos Sword method, which made sect leader Tong Tian feel that his life was in danger. Then, he did not hesitate to sacrifice the life of his last disciple, Goddess Wudong, and escape. But sect leader Tong Tian did not know that if he had persisted for a while and fought with Gohan with the idea of risking his life, Gohan might not have needed to sacrifice the life of Goddess Wudong. Then, Gohan would have taken the initiative to release the immortal killing sword formation and sent sect leader Tong Tian away. Because Gohan really did not have the sword essence to fight sect leader Tong Tian anymore. Fortunately, sect leader Tong Tian detonated Goddess Wudong in the end, and the immortal killing sword formation trapped the great power produced by her self-detonation. Then, he transferred the formation to those bandits. Otherwise, with the remaining power of Gohan, it was impossible for him to kill millions of bandits at once. As for Satan's death, it was Gohan's helplessness. After suffering a huge loss, if the remaining sword-bearers could not absorb enough sword essence from the dimensional vortex, the loss would be too great. Therefore, Gohan had to release the human sword-bearers and let them absorb the precious sword essence. Since he had released the human sword-bearer, he had to bear the risk of the sword-bearer being killed by the primitive-level bandit again. As a result, Gu Han had to squeeze out the last bit of power in his body, as well as the sword essence that the 4 immortal slaying swords had absorbed from the dimensional vortex. Then, he used all of Gu Han's power and comprehension on Satan, who stood out this time. That was the great achievement of killing a primitive-level bandit in 3 seconds, which was also a miraculous achievement that the later generations could only look up to for the rest of their lives. Thanks to this extremely terrifying battle record, the rest of the primeval bandits were so scared that their guts almost jumped out of their throat. How could they still have the time to guess Guhan's current situation? All of them wished that they had an extra pair of legs. They all ran for their lives, and humans were completely safe. I'm so tired. Looking at the dimensional vortex that was gradually shrinking in the sky, Guhan, who was lying in the deep pit, murmured and then closed his eyes. What are you guys doing? This time, Guhan did not sleep for too long because Guhan knew that it was not the time to have a good rest with himself. Once Yuenko came to his senses and realized that he was already exhausted, it was very likely that it would be another disaster for the human race. Therefore, Guhan only rested for dozens of minutes before he woke up under the cry of his heart. However, when Guhan opened his eyes, he saw that he was surrounded by people, all of whom were kneeling on one knee beside Guhan. Seeing that Guhan had woken up, they shouted at the same time, "Your Majesty Guhan, we humans will never forget your Majesty's kindness. What are you guys doing? Get up. Otherwise, I'll be no different from Ying. Guhan struggled to get up from the ground. When he saw these humans, he smiled in relief. As it turned out, Guhan's worries were unfounded. For more than 10 days, no dragon-class Yuan-ko or above dared to appear near humans. All Yuan-ko hid far away from humans, as though Yuan-ko did not exist in this world. As for Guhan, he was not interested in finding trouble with other Yuan-ko. After learning the truth, Guhan knew that the root of the calamity did not lie with Yuan-ko, but with the Tongtian sect master. As long as the Tongtian sect master was alive, the calamity would not disappear. As long as the Tongtian sect master was killed, the dimensional rift and filth would all disappear. Then, it would be the best time to deal with Yuan-ko. Right now, Guhan and humans had an even greater crisis to face: the food crisis. The food crisis was a name that was both familiar and unfamiliar to humans. The reason why it was familiar was that in the 200 to 300 years after the calamity, the food crisis had always been with humans. During these 200 to 300 years, it was said that the total number of humans who had starved to death had reached 2 billion. After all, humans had been poor at that time. Even if they had the ability to farm, without enough land, it was impossible to grow enough food for humans. At that time, humans could only rely on the small amount of land near the base city to grow food like sweet potatoes and corn. Then, through careful distribution and controlling the human population, they barely maintained the food supply. Later, when the nutrient solution synthesis machine was invented, humans could use machines, probiotics, specialized chloroplast cells, and photosynthesis to produce nutrient solutions in batches to meet the basic needs of human physiology. However, one could imagine the taste of the nutrient solution. As long as humans had a little money, they would rather spend all their money to buy natural food than eat the extremely disgusting nutrient solution. However, it was also because of the invention of the nutrient solution that humans had completely escaped from the food crisis. They could expand their population unscrupulously until the base city could no longer accommodate them. Therefore, it had been more than 700 years since humans had experienced a food crisis. But now, the food crisis had come again. After the Battle of the 12 Zuwu, the 8 major base cities had been destroyed. Only Yanjing City was slightly better off, as it had preserved all kinds of machinery needed for human life. However, with this battle and the release of the energy from the explosion of the goddess of incongruence by Guhan, the entire Yanjing City was completely destroyed. All the urban facilities, industrial machines, high-tech equipment, and even the nuclear warehouse were all destroyed. Humans had become so poor that they were left with nothing but their own bodies. Therefore, when Guhan's body recovered and he began to gather Liuyanling, Lu Shihua, the remaining 20 or so sword-bearers of the immortal sword tier, as well as some specially selected members of the council, government officials, businessmen, scientists, and other people from all walks of life to hold a human recovery conference, he realized that even if all the Yuan-ko were to die and stop harassing humans, humans would still be in danger of extinction. Because of Guhan's timely appearance, although the last 200 million human population was saved, at the same time, 200 million mouths were saved. These mouths were mouths that needed to be fed. To make matters worse, although Gohan saved these 200 million mouths, he did not save almost all the equipment in Yanjing City, including industrial equipment and high-tech equipment. Without these equipment, humans could not do anything, not even the most basic reconstruction work. Originally, humans had stored a lot of mechanical equipment in the fleeting time gap, but these equipment were transported to Yanjing City when the reconstruction of Yanjing City was carried out. After all, if they wanted to rebuild Yanjing City, these equipment were necessary. However, now that these equipment were destroyed, humans had nothing left. The only thing that could be considered lucky was that Lu Shihua had brought the remaining food with him. Even so, the food was only enough for the remaining humans to use for a month. If the food supply could not be restored after a month, the 200 million people who were lucky enough to survive would probably die. Therefore, the current food crisis was the biggest crisis facing humans. If they could not think of a way to solve this crisis, even if humans did not die, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Can't we humans find any equipment at all? Gohan looked at the human elites who were still surrounding him and said with a heavy expression, "The most important thing now is food. If we all work together, can we create a nutrient solution synthesizer?" "It's impossible, Your Majesty." A white-robed director of the Ministry of Science and Technology lowered his head and said with tears in his eyes, "The nutrient solution synthesizer is not a device that can be manufactured by ordinary industries. It involves many key components made of special materials. If these special materials can't be manufactured, it's absolutely impossible to manufacture nutrients and deposition." "How long will it take to produce these special materials?" Gohan asked helplessly. "Your Majesty, producing these special materials requires special equipment too, but to produce these special equipment requires specialized machine tools, and to produce these specialized machine tools requires a huge industrial machine. Your Majesty, please forgive us for being straightforward, but if we can guarantee the supply of food and materials, it will take the research department and the industrial department more than 3 years to complete the entire set of equipment, Your Majesty." The supervisor's words undoubtedly hit the bottom of the hearts of the participants. 3 years was most likely enough for all humans to starve to death. How could they possibly have 3 years? Gohan finally realized that the thing that threatened the survival of humans was not Yuan Ko, but their own stomach. However, no matter how capable Gohan was, there was no way he could make food out of thin air, not to mention that it was food for 200 million people. Chapter 1565. Faced with such a crucial problem, everyone in the meeting was sweating profusely. They had no idea what to do. They could not help but feel anxious. It was a problem that concerned the food supply of 200 million people. If they all starved to death, it would probably be a demon in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Everyone knew that this problem had to be solved, but no one could come up with a solution. They would rather fight Yuanko than think about this damned problem. "I wonder how our ancestors solved the problem at the beginning of the apocalypse," one of the swordsmen said. It was obvious that he was trying to find a solution to the problem from his ancestors' experience. At first, there was quite a lot of food stored in the old Yanjing City. Our ancestor had a natural dimensional pocket, so he brought all the food with him. It was barely enough for us to eat in the early stages. When we entered the fleeting time gap and the environment became safer, the ancestor organized the people in the fleeting time gap to farm. That way, we managed to get enough food to feed 100,000 people, Liu Ling said. "That's right, we can farm too." Liu Ling's words enlightened some of the people in the meeting. "We can open up a large area of fertile land. A few thousand years ago, when there was no advanced technology, our ancestors could grow enough food to feed a few 100 million people with their bare hands. Now we can use the most traditional method to grow food too. That's right. That's a good idea. The swordsman's words immediately won the approval of many people in the meeting. But soon, someone coldly retorted, I can tell that it's a guy who doesn't know anything about agriculture. How could he say something like that? Even the sweet potato, which has the shortest ripening period, needs 4 months to mature. By then, everyone would have starved to death. Humph, it's only 4 months. Our food can last for another month. At most, we can eat a little less. 1 mouthful of food is like 4 mouthfuls of food. As long as we endure it, we will be able to last for 4 months. Someone immediately said, That's right, after 4 months, I don't think even half of the 200 million people will survive. You'll be the murderer of 100 million people. What can we do? It's better than everyone starving to death. Enough, your thoughts are so naive. Do you think you can feed all of us in 4 months with just sweet potatoes? The agricultural expert who spoke first could not help but say, If you want to grow enough sweet potatoes for 200 million people, you would need at least 3 provinces of arable land. We don't have that much land. The agricultural expert's words made everyone speechless. They didn't expect that it would take 3 provinces worth of farmland to grow enough sweet potatoes. Even at their peak, humans could only control 8 base cities, which added up to less than 2 provinces. Now that human forces had declined to such an extent, the total number of sword-bearers was less than 20,000. Under such circumstances, they might not even be able to control 1/3 of a province, let alone 3 provinces. All right, there's no need to argue about this anymore. Agriculture is the foundation of our race. We must start preparing for the planting of sweet potatoes and the other crops now. The people from the Ministry of Agriculture will start collecting the seeds of all the crops we have, and compile a set of textbooks that can teach ordinary people how to plant the crops after reading them. Don't use too many words, limit it to 500. Otherwise, no one will be able to understand it, said Gohan. The people from the Ministry of Agriculture immediately nodded in agreement. The argument regarding agriculture was put aside for the time being, but it was not settled yet. They would have to wait for a month, when all the food was used up. Where were they going to find food for the humans? Everyone from the Ministry of Science and Technology, are the nutrient synthesizers all damaged? Not a single one is in perfect condition? Gohan asked the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology. Not exactly, there should be 2 nutrient synthesizers in perfect condition in the gap. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology said after a moment of recollection. Ling, can you please bring the machines over? Gohan turned to Liuyan Ling and said. Liuyan Ling nodded and disappeared from the venue. After waiting for about half an hour, Liuyan Ling returned with the 2 machines. Gohan looked at the machine carefully and found that it had a cross-sectional area of 100 square meters and a height of 6 meters, which was equivalent to the height and size of a 2-story building. How much food can this machine provide for the humans? What does it need for raw materials? Asked Gohan. If we use it sparingly and only ensure the basic supply of heat to the humans, then this machine should be able to work 24 hours a day. With such a machine working 24 hours a day, it should be able to meet the needs of around 20,000 people. As for the raw materials, we just need to add enough water, then a large amount of soil, and finally human feces. What? This nutrient solution is made from mud and feces? Some of the humans immediately felt disgusted after hearing the words of the Ministry of Science and Technology. They wanted to vomit the nutrient solution they drank yesterday. Don't you make a fuss? The person from the Ministry of Agriculture rolled his eyes at the people who vomited. Don't the seeds need mud and feces to mature? What's so surprising about that? We humans rely on feces to survive. After the Ministry of Agriculture said that, more people vomited. In other words, if we can produce 20,000 of these machines in a month, we can guarantee the food supply for everyone? Gohan interrupted the somewhat disgusting atmosphere and said directly, "Yes, Your Majesty. As long as we have 20,000 machines and send 1,000,000 people to collect the materials needed to make the nutrient solution, I can guarantee that there will be no problems with the food supply for 200 million people." The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology replied readily. He was actually bragging, but it didn't matter how much he bragged. With the current human condition, it was impossible to obtain 20,000 machines in a month no matter what. "Do we have the materials to make these machines?" Gohan asked immediately. Didn't I just say? The materials to make these machines can't be produced at the moment. The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology said pitifully. However, before he could finish, he was directly interrupted by Gohan. "I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you, do we have the materials to make these machines? I'm afraid we don't have that either. They've all turned into ruins and are lying in the deep pit." The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology said weakly. "Then, we do have them." Gohan's brows relaxed and immediately ordered the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology to send a large number of sword-bearers directly to the bottom of the deep pit to transport the materials to make the nutrient solution synthesizer. Although they did not know why Gohan gave such an inexplicable order, at this time, Gohan's prestige was so great that no one would question Gohan's orders. Therefore, the people from the Ministry of Science and Technology immediately left with some sword-bearers. After less than an hour, these sword-bearers returned with colorful metal balls of various shapes in their dimensional pockets. "What are these?" Some people in the venue could not help but ask when they saw these strange metal balls. "These are the materials needed to make the machines," the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology said with a bitter smile. "It's just that these metals have all melted under the effect of high energy and finally gathered into each of these metal balls. With our current technological power, we can't separate these metals at all. We can only bring them all according to His Majesty's request." "Very good. That's enough. You guys have done well." Bringing these metal balls directly was originally a helpless move by the Ministry of Science and Technology, but they did not expect to win Gohan's praise, which shocked everyone. What does Gohan want these metal balls that have all kinds of metals mixed together for? Could it be that he has the ability to separate these metals out of thin air? As soon as this question popped up in everyone's mind, they saw Gohan wave his hand forward, and one of the metal balls the size of a basketball flew directly into Gohan's hand. Then, something happened that blinded everyone. After the metal ball was held in Gohan's hand, the metal ball that was as hard as an alloy seemed to suffer from osteoporosis at this moment. Countless powder began to fall from the metal ball. The powder that fell off did not simply fall to the ground. Instead, it seemed to be guided by something as it split into hundreds of different thin lines and floated towards different landing points. Finally, it piled up on the ground and formed small piles of powder. At first, the speed of this metal ball powder was not fast, but as time went by, the metal ball began to shrink rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the different thin lines became thicker and thicker. In the end, only 10 minutes later, the basketball-sized metal ball completely disappeared in Gohan's hand, turning into hundreds of piles of powder. "Oh my God, this is a hardcore fan, a hardcore fan!" An expert from the Ministry of Science and Technology suddenly rushed to the largest pile of powder among the more than 100 piles of powder, grabbed a handful of powder, put it in his palm, and carefully looked at it. Then, he stuck it to his nose and smelled it. Finally, he even licked the powder with his tongue. Finally, he shouted excitedly, "This is iron powder! This is high-purity iron powder! Oh my God! I've never seen iron powder of such high purity! Oh my God, how is this possible?" Chapter 1566. The scream of this expert startled everyone. Ordinary people might not understand the shocking inside story behind this expert's words, but the rest of the experts immediately reacted. Without hesitation, they pounced on the other piles of powder. As a result, each of them let out a roar like the expert just now. These experts were horrified to find that these piles of more than 100 different kinds of powder were all extremely high-purity powder of various elements. Although it was impossible to judge the purity of these powders with the naked eye, according to the experience of these experts, the purity of these powders was probably higher than any powder extracted by any scientific means. The precision was probably more than 12 decimal places, which was almost no different from 100% purity. And these piles of powders were almost equivalent to placing all the elements on the periodic table here, and they were all extremely pure elements. The appearance of some elements even exceeded the limits of the scientists' imagination. Students who had studied chemistry knew that some elements could exist independently, but some could not. They could only exist in this world in the form of compound. This was almost an eternal truth in the field of chemistry. However, with the appearance of these piles of powders, the truth in the field of chemistry was broken. Those elements that could not exist independently had all formed individual substances and appeared in front of them. But how did all this happen? Although the formation of these powders happened directly under the eyes of these scientists, it was precisely because they saw the formation of these powders with their naked eyes that the scientists felt even more incredulous. Who would believe that just by placing a metal ball in one's hand, the metal ball would automatically split into 100 piles of powders composed of various pure elements? Was this still the power of a human? Your Majesty, are you a god? A scientist could not help but ask all kinds of questions in his mind, kneeling in front of Gohan and dumbfoundedly. God! A trace of a playful expression appeared on Gohan's face. There are many gods in Yuan Ko's place, and a lot of them have died in my hands. Do you think I am a god? The scientist was speechless. Indeed, there were many things in Yuan Ko's place, but there were even more gods. In fact, the ability of a sword holder at the level of a fairy sword was already comparable to the legendary gods. No, this is a power that even the gods don't have. I'm afraid this is a power that only those who have mastered the origin of the world can have. Another scientist said nervously. All right, you don't have to guess anymore. You don't have to worry about how I separated it. Mark all of these piles of powder for me and indicate what kind of element it is. Then, give me a list of the materials needed to build this machine, the materials needed to make the different components, and the elemental ratios and chemical compounds of these materials. Give me a detailed table, understand? Gohan said to the scientists with a serious face. Yes. To be honest, this was not an easy task. A nutrient solution synthesizer involved thousands of different materials, and each material had a different composition and element. If it had to be manually listed, the list of materials alone would probably be tens or even millions of words. This was definitely not an easy task. However, the scientists accepted it without hesitation. Although they did not know what Gohan wanted to do, they knew that it was enough to follow His Majesty's orders. This time, His Majesty would definitely lead mankind out of this predicament and completely save mankind from disaster. Therefore, under the instructions of the person in charge of the Science and Technology Department, almost all the scientists threw themselves into the work of analyzing the materials. They immediately wrote down the list in the conference room. At this time, Gohan did not idle around. He found the person in charge of the medical department and asked for all the nanos in stock. The medical department could not even cry when faced with Gohan's request. The medical department was responsible for treating the patient. Even when the battle was at its most intense, they still insisted on treating the injured sword-bearers in the core area. Therefore, most of the medical resources were stored in the hospital. Moreover, Gohan's void gate appeared a little too hastily. All the humans entered the void gate as soon as possible and did not bring along the various medicines that were still in the hospital. As a result, after the destruction of Yanjing City, almost all the resources of the medical department were destroyed. For example, there were only 3 bottles of nanocapsules that the medical department gave to Gohan at this time. The nanocapsules added up to less than 3 million nanomachines. Too little. Looking at the 3 bottles of nanocapsules in his hand, Gohan once again felt how terrifying the shortage of human resources was. However, at this time, Gohan could not afford to lose the nanocapsules. This was the only way for Gohan to save mankind. Therefore, Gohan immediately said to all the sword holders attending the meeting, "Everyone, I hope that everyone can give me the remaining nanocapsules in your hands. I have an important use for them. This is related to the fate of the entire human race." Gohan said to all the sword-bearers. The sword-bearers looked at each other, and without saying a word, they began to mess around in the dimensional pocket again. Needless to say, these sword holders' reserves were really quite rich. In just a short while, hundreds of bottles of nanocapsules were sent to Gohan. This also meant that 100 million nanomachines were in Gohan's hands. Not enough, it's still not enough. Gohan shook his head. At this time, his consciousness fragments had exceeded 10 billion. If he wanted to combine all his consciousness fragments with nanomachines, he would need at least 10,000 bottles of nanocapsules. I'll go to all the sword holders and ask for them. Seeing Gohan's reaction, Lu Shihua seemed to have understood something and immediately rushed out of the meeting venue. The other sword holders also said that they would go to other brothers and friends who had not yet attended the meeting to ask for nanocapsules. This was originally a matter of sending a group text message, but because the quantum communication switch was also damaged in Yanjing City, at this time, personal terminals had become useless and could not be connected to the internet. It was impossible to contact other humans. They could only convey Gohan's instructions through the most primitive way of word of mouth. Fortunately, there were enough sword-bearers in the conference room. They each found their friends and brothers. After saying that this was what His Majesty Hongju needed, these sword-bearers also contributed their precious nanocapsules without hesitation. It should be known that nanocapsules were the key materials that could save lives at critical times when there was a shortage of materials. After hearing that this was what Gohan needed, the sword holders did not hesitate to contribute such important materials. Soon, there were thousands of bottles of nanocapsules in Gohan's hands. Gohan broke all the nanocapsules in one breath and then controlled his consciousness fragments to merge with the nanomachines. In the end, Gohan had 1 billion nanomachines that were freely controlled by Gohan. However, this column only met 1/10 of Gohan's needs. Do you have the manufacturing process and materials for nanomachines? Gohan asked the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology nodded, put down what he was doing, and wrote for a minute. Then, he sent a piece of paper full of words to Gohan's hands. It's easy to manufacture these nanomachines. Perhaps because of their small size, the manufacturing process and materials for nanomachines were surprisingly simple. It required about a dozen different elemental materials. Come on. After Gohan memorized the words on the paper, he pointed at the pile of material powder on the ground. Then, more than a dozen piles of material powder flew into Gohan's hands like a thin line. When these material powder gathered in Gohan's hands, they disappeared without a trace, as if they did not exist at all. Everyone was baffled by this scene. Only Gohan himself knew that the moment these materials used to make nanomachines were gathered in Gohan's hands, they were directly made into new nanomachines by the nanomachines controlled by Gohan. They quickly merged with Gohan's consciousness fragments and in turn, made new nanomachines. The dozen piles of material powder on the ground were not enough for Gohan. In just 2 or 3 minutes, the smallest amount of elemental powder was used up. However, the number of nanomachines in Gohan's hands had increased by 100 million. Without saying a word, Gohan grabbed an even larger metal ball with his left hand. Just like before, this metal ball was once again broken down into different elemental powders. But other than the elemental powders that he could not use, which continued to pile up on the ground, the rest of the elemental powders flew directly into the palm of Gohan's right hand and began to be used to make new nanomachines. Just like that, after a full 3 hours, almost all the metal balls brought by the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology were used up, and Gohan finally had the number of nanomachines he needed to make 10 billion nanomachines. All the fragments of consciousness in his body could be put to use. It's done. We're finally done writing. It was also at this time that the thousands of crazy scientists actually spent less than 4 hours writing down the various materials needed to make the nutrient solution synthesizer, as well as the detailed elemental ratios of each material, as well as which components needed which materials. I hope I can complete such a complicated task. Looking at the thousands of pieces of paper in his hands and the huge house-like machine in front of him, even Gohan could not help but feel a huge challenge at this moment. Gohan wanted to challenge something that no one in human history had ever accomplished, or rather, it was something that no human had ever dared to imagine. That was to use the strength of humans to use nanomachines as tools and molecules as materials to create a complete large-scale mechanical device. Chapter 1567. I'm sure everyone has played with building blocks when they were young. Building a castle or an animal out of building blocks was something that gave a sense of achievement. Then there was a game called Minecraft. In Minecraft, you could build a city out of pixel-like blocks. This was something that even an adult would feel a sense of accomplishment and would never get tired of it. But if you were given billions of building blocks to build a city out of, would you still find it interesting? You might call it a lunatic because it wasn't something that humans could do. At this moment, almost everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. Under everyone's watchful eyes, after the metal balls were decomposed into powder, they all immediately moved from Gohan's left hand to his right hand, forming a brand new material. Gohan's speed was slow at first, and he only disassembled 7 or 8 metal balls in an hour. But as time passed, Gohan's speed became faster and faster, and he even disassembled 7 or 8 metal balls at the same time. The thing that Gohan was building in his right hand revealed its true form. It was the prototype of a nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Oh my god! What kind of ability is that? Is Hongjun Jiandi planning to build a nutrient solution manufacturing machine made up of tens of thousands of components with his own hands? Everyone was shocked by what they saw. The meeting had been going on for almost 20 hours, and no one had eaten for a day. But no one was willing to leave the room. They were all focused on Gohan, looking forward to the final product that Gohan made. This wait lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. After 2 days and 2 nights, all the metal spheres had been decomposed, and the 2 nutrient solution manufacturing machines that looked exactly the same, except that one of them did not have any paint on it, were placed in the venue. Try it out. See if this machine works. After the final disassembly, Gohan couldn't help but feel dizzy. He weakly waved at the people from the science department and fell to the ground. Fortunately, Liuyan Ling reacted quickly and caught Gohan in her arms. The people from the science department were stunned for a while before stupidly coming back to their senses. They fetched soil, water and smelly feces from outside and stuffed them into the nutrient solution manufacturing machine that Gohan just made. As the power was connected, the nutrient solution manufacturing machine began to rumble. In less than 10 minutes, the first light green nutrient solution flowed out from the outlet of the machine. Let me have a taste first. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology eagerly poured the first nutrient solution into a basin and drank it without hesitation. Although the taste of the nutrient solution made people frown, the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology exclaimed with joy, "It's exactly the same, It tastes exactly the same as the nutrient solution. And I feel like I'm full of energy now. The hunger from the past 2 days and 2 nights has disappeared without a trace. Although the experts personally tasted it and believed that the nutrient solution produced was absolutely the most authentic, the science department soon brought the only remaining testing equipment over. But very quickly, the Ministry of Science and Technology brought the only remaining testing equipment over. After a series of detailed and scientific tests, the testers from the Ministry of Science and Technology patted their chests and assured everyone that this was definitely the genuine nutrient solution without any side effects. Sir Guhan had really broken down and recast a nutrient solution manufacturing machine. The words of the person in charge of the science department made everyone exclaim. Could it be that sword immortal Hong Jun really mastered the ability to break down and recombine matter and made a nutrient solution manufacturing machine? Anyone who had a little understanding of science knew that in order to directly use elements to construct matter, it had to be constructed directly at the atomic level. Even a drop of water had 670 trillion molecules. Just looking at this number could probably make many people dumbfounded. How terrifying was this Hongjun Jiendi to be able to master such a terrifying power? If this power continued to develop, how terrifying would it be? Thinking of this, everyone didn't dare to think carefully anymore. Then, they immediately looked at Gohan on the rostrum. When they were about to flatter Gohan, they found that Hongjun Jiendi had fallen into a deep sleep in Liu Ling's arms. This sleep lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. No, you slept for 3 days just to manufacture one. You can't go on like this. Not long after Gohan woke up, Liu Ling immediately objected when she heard that Gohan planned to repeat the behavior of a few days ago and break down and re-inject the nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Liu Ling's objection was entirely due to her concern for Gohan's health. After Gohan completed the first decomposition and recasting, he slept for 3 days. Obviously, this matter consumed a lot of Gohan's spirit. Liu Ling couldn't bear to see Gohan overdraft his body like this. Well, there are still 200 million people waiting to be fed, but we still need 20,000 such nutrient solution manufacturing machines. If I don't work hard, will I watch our compatriots starve to death? Gohan said while holding Liu Ling in his arms. But it's already too late. Liu Ling lay on Gohan's thigh and said with tears in her eyes, "It took you 2 days to break down and reconstruct one machine. In the end, you have to sleep for another 3 days to recover your spirit. You can only make 6 in a month at most. This is just a drop in the bucket. Why are you so persistent? How about this? You'll need to figure out how to build an industrial machine. As long as you can build one, we'll be able to use it to build more equipment and restore the entire system. We'll be able to mass-produce the nutrient solution maker then. You don't have to work so hard." Fleeting Ling said, "That's right. You're right. I should make the industrial machine first." The corner of Gohan's mouth twitched. But by the time we restore our entire industrial system through the industrial machine, it will probably be 3 or 4 years later. By then, our compatriots will have starved to death. But, well, there are no buts. The reason why the production of the first one is so slow is because I have no experience. As long as the first one can be made, I can greatly improve the production speed. Besides, I can split my consciousness multiple times, so the speed can be even faster. Gohan did not wait for Liu Ling to persuade him again. He began to command everyone to go to the deep pit in Yanjing City to collect the metal balls and move them all to an open area. Gohan himself sat directly in the open area and began to break down the metal balls while directly casting the new nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Just as Gohan said to Liu Ling, after the first experience, Gohan's second production speed was much faster. This time, it only took 25 hours to successfully manufacture the second nutrient solution manufacturing machine. The third nutrient solution manufacturing machine only took 20 hours. By the time the 10th nutrient solution manufacturing machine was completed, Guhan had reduced the time to 2 hours. By the time the 100th nutrient solution manufacturing machine was completed, the time had been reduced to only 20 minutes. Teacher Wang looked. Why is this machine different from the previous machines? Looking at these nutrient solution manufacturing machines that were broken down and cast by Guhan, a big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology said in disbelief. The reason why Guhan could increase the speed of the nutrient solution manufacturing machine to 20 minutes was not without reason. Compared with the previous machines, these newly cast machines were obviously only 1/5 of the previous size. Is this a shrunken version of the nutrient solution manufacturing machine? Another big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology muttered. He secretly started a nutrient solution manufacturing machine that had just been broken down and cast, and then carefully recorded the production status of this nutrient solution manufacturing machine. In the end, he was surprised to find that compared with the original machines, not only was there no difference in the quality of the nutrient solution manufactured by the newly produced machines, but the production speed of the nutrient solution was also about 10 times faster than that of the previous machines. In other words, such a newly produced machine could meet the nutrient solution needs of 200,000 people a day. In that case, the original 10,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines had been reduced to 1,000, which could meet the needs of all humans. This was something that these two big shots could never imagine. It seems that His Majesty Hong Jun did not just cast them. He also improved these machines. A big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology side. Since ancient times, if they had not seen it with their own eyes, perhaps no one would believe that there was such a terrifying thing in this world, and that there were such terrifying humans. When they saw the decomposed metal powder piled up like bricks and directly piled up into a nutrient solution manufacturing machine, all the humans were dumbfounded. Because Guhan was directly broken down and recast in an open area, almost all the humans could see Guhan's earth-shattering deeds. At first, everyone was shocked, and some people even collapsed to the ground in fear, unable to say a word. But as time went by, humans gradually got used to and accepted Guhan's abnormal behavior, and even became somewhat accustomed to it. It was said that some leaders of major forces secretly sent some Yuan Ko with the ability to hide into human territories. After seeing what Guhan had done with their own eyes, all the big shots Yuan Ko were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Some of the big shots Yuan Ko who were still in the main world were directly scared into the dimensional world. This main world was really too terrifying. There was actually such an abnormal human like Guhan. They didn't want to see Guhan again. It seemed that until Guhan died, these frightened Yuan Ko big shots didn't dare to appear in the main world again. Chapter 1568. Originally, humans thought that one machine every 20 minutes was Guhan's limit, but it turned out that there was no limit to Guhan's improvement. Although the speed of one machine every 20 minutes could not be improved any further, Guhan began to try to make 2 nutrient solution manufacturing machines at the same time. This number soon became 4, 8, 16, and finally, when Guhan reached the total number of 1,000, he could make 32 nutrient solution manufacturing machines at the same time. At this time, there were only 6 days left before the 1-month deadline. In other words, it only took Guhan 19 days to make these 1,000 machines. When Guhan completed the task and stood up again from the ground, no human looked at Guhan as if he was a human. The way they looked at Guhan had become the way they looked at God. When most humans saw Guhan, they immediately knelt down to Guhan and kowtowed respectfully as if they were facing Buddha. A few months ago, Ing Zheng wanted to use violence to force everyone to kneel in front of him, but he failed in the end. Now, Guhan did not show any desire to become a god, but all human beings took the initiative to kneel in front of Guhan, sincerely offering their knees and foreheads. In their eyes, Gohan had become the only god. After all, when they saw how Gohan created things out of thin air with their own eyes, when they learned that Gohan had been working day and night for 19 days to satisfy the rations of all human beings, Gohan's position in their hearts had become that of a god. They believed that as long as the human race continued to exist, Gohan's position as a god would never change. This was something that Gohan had never thought of before. To put it bluntly, at this moment, Gohan's position in the hearts of human beings had surpassed that of Kenzu 1,000 years ago. After all, Kenzu was just an ancestor, and it was still within the scope of human beings. It was said that there were already many people who addressed Gohan as the god of swords in private. Why do I feel like the title of sword god is less awesome than Kenzu's? After learning about this matter, Gohan couldn't help but say with a bitter smile. However, Gohan didn't have time to complain. After 19 consecutive days of sleepless nights, coupled with 3 consciousness fragments, Gohan's soul was on the verge of collapse. Therefore, he fell asleep again, and this sleep lasted for half a month before he woke up. However, these 19 days of hard work were not completely in vain. During this half-month-long sleep, Gohan was not simply sleeping. After going through so much hard work, Gohan was surprised to find that he might have found a completely different path. In fact, human beings were not really safe, and sect leader Tong Tian was not really dead. He must be hiding somewhere and licking his wounds. This time, it was impossible to trick sect leader Tong Tian again. After what happened this time, sect leader Tong Tian would not appear before Zhang Tai fully recovered even if the sky collapsed and the earth collapsed. Therefore, the next time he fought with sect leader Tong Tian, he would face sect leader Tong Tian in his complete state. At that time, if he was still unable to become a sage, then Gohan would definitely lose. Even if Gohan seemed to be a godlike existence right now, he would definitely lose. Therefore, Gohan had to find a way to become a sage. Previously, Gohan tried to cultivate a heavenly way through the Genesis Sword Seed, and then come into contact with the Great Way through this heavenly way. However, because of Liu Ling's aging, in the end, Gohan sacrificed the Genesis Sword Seed he had just created and used the power of the Genesis Sword Seed to save Liu Ling. In this way, unless Gohan could find the 12 Zhu Wu again and defeat the real body of Pengu formed by their fusion, he would not be able to get another Genesis Sword Seed. The appearance of the 12 Zhu Wu previously was the result of various coincidences. If Gohan took the initiative to look for the 12 Zhu Wu, it would undoubtedly be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Gohan was not sure if he could find the 12 Zhu Wu before sect leader Tong Tian completely recovered. This time, by decomposing and recasting the nutrient liquid manufacturing machine, Gohan seemed to have found a brand new path. However, even Gohan could not be sure if this path was true or not. Gohan needed to practice it himself to get the real answer. However, if he wanted to practice his guess, the price that Gohan would have to pay was too high. Therefore, Gohan had to think carefully about whether he should go deep into different dimensional worlds to look for the 12 Zhu Wu, or experiment with this new path that seemed unreliable and unsure if it would succeed in the end. Just when Gohan was having a headache about this, a new problem appeared. Your Majesty, please think of a way. 30,000 old people have starved to death yesterday. Not long after Gohan woke up, the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs suddenly rushed into Gohan's tent and cried, "What the hell is going on?" Gohan asked as he glanced at Liu Ling, who was following closely behind the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Obviously, Liu Ling had been stopping the person in charge from entering and did not want him to disturb Gohan's rest. "Your Majesty, there's no electricity. We have no electricity," the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs said in a hoarse voice. Gohan thought that he could solve the food crisis that humans were facing if he created enough nutrient liquid manufacturing machines. However, Gohan neglected a crucial problem. If there was no electricity, all the nutrient liquid manufacturing machines were just decorations. At this time, the only source of electricity for humans was the nuclear fusion batteries collected from the human sword bearers. By relying on these nuclear fusion batteries, they could barely form a large power source for humans to use. However, these nuclear fusion batteries were only batteries after all and did not have much power. Even if they were put together, they would only have less than 1/10,000,000th of the original power in Yenjing. Originally, because human electrical appliances were almost destroyed, this power source was barely enough. However, as the nutrient liquid manufacturing machines continued to appear, these large electricity consumers began to crazily devour the electricity generated by the nuclear fusion batteries. Just 10 machines had already used up all the electricity. This meant that even if Gohan created 1,000 nutrient liquid manufacturing machines, only 10 of them would actually work. Of course, there would be a situation of insufficient food supply. These things should have been reported to Gohan immediately, but Liuyan Ling and Lu Shihua forcibly suppressed it. They knew very well that if they let Gohan take care of the problem of electricity, Gohan would probably really die of exhaustion. They must give Gohan enough time to rest. The direct consequence of this was that on the 6th day after Gohan fell into a deep sleep, the food supply was already insufficient. By the 10th day, there were weak old people who starved to death one after another. By the 15th day, it had developed to the extent that tens of thousands of people starved to death every day. The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs finally could not stand such a tragic atmosphere, so he saw a gap and forcibly broke through the blockade of Liuyan Ling and Lu Shihua, and laid the facts in front of Gohan. Sigh. After learning the truth of the matter, Gohan did not say much. He neither blamed Liuyan Ling for hiding it, nor did he praise the person in charge for his courage. He just calmly entered the void, and it did not take long for him to return with a cute little girl. Here, take her. Gohan threw the little girl in front of the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. What? The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs was shocked. He did not understand what Gohan meant by throwing a little girl out. She has eaten so many of our high-purity nuclear fuel rods, it's time for her to contribute a little to us humans. Gohan said calmly. Hurry up and use me. Oh no. The little girl said with a sad face. She was originally hiding in a nearby mountain to eat the high-purity nuclear fuel rods she had stolen from the humans with relish when she was caught by a hand. After being threatened by Gohan, she could only resign to her fate. This is just a child. How? The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs said with a dumbfounded look. Little girl. Mount. Riding on a little girl. The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs suddenly had a frightening scene in his mind. She is not a child. She is just my mount. You can rest assured and use her. Under Gohan's forceful order, the person in charge could only take the mount of Emperor Hongjun to the temporary power room doubtfully. Then, he connected all kinds of power to the little girl. Then, the little girl's body flashed, and all 1,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines lit up the green light of working in an instant. These 1,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines all entered the working state. Looking at the little girl, she was still lively, as if it was not difficult to supply electricity to so many nutrient solution manufacturing machines. Finally, with the help of this Kangana brand lowly-type fully automatic generator, the human food crisis was finally alleviated. The later generations also recorded Kangana's contribution. After human society returned to normal, they also specially carved a sculpture of a little girl with all kinds of wires wrapped around her body to commemorate Kangana's contribution to mankind. It was just that no one knew if the level of the sculptor was not good enough, but the wires wrapped around Kangana looked like tentacles. Although the problem of electricity consumption was solved, it was only a temporary solution. With Kangana's jumpy character, she could not persist as a power bank for too long. Gohan had to recreate the nuclear fusion generator like how he made the nutrient solution manufacturing machine. With the solution of the electricity problem, more problems such as housing problems, defense problems, industrial problems and so on would emerge. These needed Gohan to solve. More importantly, humans couldn't stay in the wilderness forever. They had to restore the base cities they once had. Otherwise, they would be nothing more than wandering ghosts. Of course, for Gohan, there was another more important thing, which was the problem of the Qingpin sword. In other words, the problem of the Qingping sword. Chapter 1569. Ever since Qing Ping suppressed Qingping's consciousness and took control of the Qingpin sword, it had been under Qing Ping's control. Gohan could only forcibly control the Qingpin sword by commanding it. This problem shouldn't have dragged on for so long, but after defeating Tong Tian, Gohan was busy solving many problems, so he didn't care about Qingping's question. However, it didn't mean that the problem didn't exist. It was stuck in Gohan's throat, forcing Gohan to solve it as soon as possible. Now, Gohan finally had time to solve the problem of Qingpin sword. It seemed to be easy to solve. As long as he cooperated with Qing Ping to suppress Qingping's consciousness and pull it back, it would be enough. However, when Gohan tried to solve this problem, he was horrified to find that he couldn't get Qingping's consciousness back no matter how hard he tried. "I've eaten that brat's consciousness," Qing Ping said to Gohan proudly after Qingpin's sword turned into a bride again. Her face was filled with the joy of revenge. "What did you say?" Gohan couldn't help trembling. It was the first time that Gohan found that he couldn't control his own body. "Gohan, are you okay?" Qidian suddenly appeared beside Gohan and held Gohan's body so that Gohan wouldn't fall. At this moment, all of Gohan's sword ladies turned into sword ladies at the same time. It wasn't because of Gohan's order, nor was it their own will. It was a sign of losing control. After hearing Qing Ping's words, Gohan suddenly lost control of his body, soul, and will, which made all of his sword ladies turn into sword ladies automatically. All of Gohan's sword ladies sensed the bone-chilling fear in Gohan's heart through this. Qidian immediately held Gohan in his arms, feeling sorry for him. "I said I ate her will." Qing Ping seemed to enjoy Gohan's frightened and trembling expression very much. She continued to say proudly, "She was just a part of me. Now I've reintegrated her into my soul. That's the right thing to do, isn't it? Idiot, I split her to repair the injury in the depths of my soul wholeheartedly. At the same time, I didn't want the real me to face a fake master like you. My only master is the great sect leader Tong Tian. No one else is worthy of being my master. I can't even call him master. Therefore, I simply split a part of my soul to deal with you, a chess piece," the Qingping sword said coldly. Without anyone's guidance, the Qingping sword automatically spilled its story like beans pouring out beans. It turned out that after sect leader Tong Tian was sealed, he temporarily threw Qing Ping's sword back to the main world and threw it to Fleeting Time calendar. At the same time, he gave Qing Ping a task, which was to find and assist Hong Jun of the next era, who was destined to defeat him. Then, Qing Ping's sword lurked beside him as a chess piece. Finally, if she could pull him to sect leader Tong Tian's side, she would try her best to keep him alive until sect leader Tong Tian was resurrected. Then, she would wait for sect leader Tong Tian's order. "So, your first master is actually Kanzu, right?" After listening to Qing Ping's sword story, Gohan asked in a trembling voice. "That's right. According to your human literature, Kanzu doesn't have an ancient sword lady or a treasure sword lady. He started his path as a famous sword lady. Actually, he has an ancient sword rank sword maiden and a treasure sword rank sword maiden. The ancient sword rank sword maiden is me, and the treasure sword rank sword maiden is the fishbowl sword." As soon as Qing Ping opened her mouth, she revealed a secret that no human had ever heard of. Everyone shifted their attention to Doyu. The little loli expressed with a cute face that the sword ancestor's memory that she had received regarding the fishbowl sword did not contain any memory of the sword ancestor. Her first master was definitely not the sword ancestor. The reason why you don't have any memory of fleeting time calendar is because your personality was destroyed by me. The Qingping sword said coldly, back then, I thought that fleeting year calendar was the new Hongjun that old master mentioned. At that time, I didn't think of splitting a soul to deal with him, so I could only deal with him with my own will. My acting was quite good, but I didn't expect the Yuchang sword to discover my true intentions, so I killed her soul. I didn't expect fleeting time calendar to find out about this, so he personally broke me and threw me into a desert. He thought that no one would be able to discover my existence from then on. But the sword master never expected that a few years later, someone would build a city on that desert. He even turned the place where I was into the sword burial ground. He used it to repair the damaged sword ladies and me. The person and city that Qing Ping sword was referring to were, of course, Zhejian Jiendi and Yuzhang City. So that's how it is. That's why the Lun Yen family sent people to take you away from me at all costs, right? They didn't want to harm me, but to protect me, right? Gu Han suddenly understood many things. He understood why Rina Takasaka was so insistent on snatching the sword of poverty from him back then, but she was unwilling to harm his life. Gu Han had always thought that the Lun Yen family did this to steal the Qinpin sword from him, coveting the Qinpin sword's high value and power. From the looks of it now, the Lun Yen family probably did this to protect him, to prevent him from falling into the Qinpin sword's trap. It seemed like the Lun Yen family had always been doing good things. That's about it. Although the Lun Yen family didn't know what my goal was until his death, he could vaguely sense that my goal was related to the old master. That's why he abandoned me in such a secluded place, hoping that the future Hongjun wouldn't find me. But he never expected that I would become that person's first sword lady. The Qingping sword's words had solved many of the mysteries. Should I thank the Lun Yen family properly? Gu Han smiled bitterly as he looked in the direction of Mount Lun Yen. Mount Lun Yen and the Lun Yen family were still intact. This surprised Gu Han. The 12 Zhu Wu's hatred for humans was so strong that he even destroyed Yanjing City, but he didn't destroy Mount Lun Yen and the Lun Yen family. This was very strange. Once upon a time, Gu Han had wanted to set foot on Mount Lun Yen to take revenge for the Qingping sword and the Gu Xuanwu. From the looks of it now, the hatred for the Qinpin sword no longer existed. The only reason for Gu Han to take revenge was the Gu Xuanwu. However, the last successor of the Lun Yen family had become his woman. How could Gu Han have the face to take revenge on the Lun Yen family? Was he here to play a game of domestic violence? On the other side, Qing Ping, who had already opened her mouth, continued to ramble on. After I met you, I knew that I couldn't make the same mistake as the fleeting calendar back then. So, after I transformed into the Sword Maiden, I immediately split a soul fragment to replace my original soul, and I hid in the sword to sleep. Even if I don't say it, you and I both know it, don't you? No wonder you were taller and colder when you completed your synchronization. I thought it was because you slept for too long. So it turns out that the first time I saw you was the real you. The next time I saw you was my Qinpin. Gu Han sighed. He recalled the first time he and Qinpin met. These scenes lingered in Gu Han's mind, and Gu Han couldn't forget them. My plan was so good, but the Lun Yen family came out halfway. I had no choice but to save your life and let you know of my existence. Afterwards, that little bastard took control of me and took half of my soul energy. She even rode on top of me and wanted to devour my existence. Qingping said with a face full of resentment, but in the end I still won and she lost. After I returned to Old Master's hands, with the help of Old Master's power, I directly devoured that little bastard's soul. It was so satisfying, so satisfying. That little bastard is gone. He'll never appear again. Don't even think about seeing that little bastard again. Ha 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 ha. Satisfying. Satisfying. Qingping began to laugh maniacally. Although Gohan had already guessed this, he still couldn't help but feel the world shake when he heard it from Qingping's mouth. The 80 billion fragments of his consciousness began to collide violently, causing Gohan's soul to feel like it was about to explode. She lost to the master she loved the most. In the hands of the master that she usually wanted to protect, this was really a huge joke. Ha 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 ha. On the other side, Qingping continued to mock loudly. Actually, the one who killed that little bastard wasn't me, nor was it the old master. It was you. Qingping shouted savagely. If you hadn't allowed me to take over that body, if you hadn't pretended to be smart and used yourself as bait to assassinate the old master, if you had suppressed me the moment you discovered me, then your Qingpin wouldn't have died, and she wouldn't have been devoured by me. It's you're the one who killed that little bastard. Ha 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 ha. Poochie. Gohan couldn't bear the stimulation any longer. The 80 billion fragments of consciousness in his head all exploded. Gohan's head was like a ruptured water pipe. Intense blood spurted out from the 7 holes in his head. There was even sticky brain matter mixed within the blood. Qingpin. In the silent abyss, Gohan called out this name. For the first time in his life, he felt so regretful about a decision he had made. Chapter 1570. Oh no, Gohan, what's wrong with you? Husband, what's wrong with you? Qi Dian held Gohan, who was spurting blood like an out-of-control fire hydrant, and shouted in horror. Xian Yuan's sword reacted immediately and said, "The fragments of consciousness in his body have exploded, and his soul has begun to disintegrate. If we don't find a way to repair his soul, he's dead." He's dead? What will happen to us? Extinguish Immortal Sword asked subconsciously. What else can we do? Of course, we'll turn back to our original appearance. Zhu Xian said. No. We can't turn back to our original appearance. Otherwise, we won't be able to escape from Tongtian's hands. No. Hey Gohan, you can't die. You can't be so devastated by such a small thing. Aren't you going to save humans? Get up. The Extinguish Immortal Sword shook Gohan's head forcefully, but other than making Gohan's blood spurt out more intensely, there was no other use. Stop, or else Gohan will die from your shaking. Qi Dian pushed Extinguish Immortal Sword away. Ha ha, he's going to die like this. Qingping also looked at Gohan in disbelief. She couldn't believe that Gohan, who was so powerful that he could even defeat her old master, was going to die just because of her words and the disappearance of a sword lady. Ha ha. This is ridiculous. This is really ridiculous. You really like that little bastard the most. You've never had me in your heart. You're going to die because of that little bastard. Qingping looked up at the sky as if she was looking for something hidden in the depths of the starry sky. At the same time, she shouted, "Master, did you see that? Qingping has avenged you. Qingping has done what you couldn't do. Master, please show up quickly and bring Qingping back." So noisy, kill her. Qi Dian, who was in a state of anxiety and despair, shouted angrily when he heard Qingping's shout towards the sky. I'm going to kill that bastard. The celestial extinguishing sword, which had been worrying about being unable to vent its fear, did not say a word. It appeared beside Qingping in a flash. Just as it was about to wring her neck, Qingping, who had been shouting loudly, closed her eyes and fell stiffly to the ground. In the end, she simply changed back into her sword form. You can't kill her. She's connected to Gohan's Purple Palace. Without Gohan's protection, if you kill her, Gohan's Purple Palace will be destroyed, and we'll die with him. I didn't touch her. The Xianyuan sword suddenly shouted when it saw Qingping fall down. Zhu Xian raised his hands innocently and said, I didn't touch her, she fell down before I even touched her. Forget it. Put her back into the scabbard first. The most important thing now is to save Master. After the celestial extinguishing sword finished speaking, Zhu Xian obediently put Qing Ping back into the scabbard. Qing Ping's matter could be ignored for now, but Guhan's problem had to be solved. At this time, Guhan's 7 orifices were bleeding much better. But this in itself was not a good thing. On the contrary, it meant that Guhan's blood pressure was already insufficient. If all his blood flowed out, then Guhan would really be finished. In this world, other than Guhan who could reconstruct his body, there was no one else who could be as abnormal as Guhan. This meant that no one could save Guhan like how Guhan saved Lu Shihua. However, in the face of such a critical situation, although Guhan had 12 sword maidens, they were all helpless. They had no idea how to save Guhan. In the end, Chi-Chi could only cry as he carried Guhan back into the tent and found Liuyan Ling. What? Guhan's consciousness has been greatly stimulated to the point that his consciousness is colliding with each other and collapsing. His soul is about to dissipate? Liuyan Ling was shocked to see Chi-Chi appear before her with a face full of tears. She immediately rushed to Guhan's side and carefully sent her consciousness into Guhan's mind. As a result, she found that Guhan's soul had reached a rather dangerous level. It was like a candle in the wind, in danger of being extinguished at any time. Something that Tong Tian had schemed for 1,000 years to no avail had been easily achieved with a few words from Qing Ping. Miss Ling, your Liuyan clan is knowledgeable. You must know a way to save Guhan, right? Chi-Chi held Liuyan Ling's hand with anticipation in her eyes. At this moment, the only one who could save Guhan was Liuyan Ling. How would I know? Liuyan Ling was also horrified and flustered. She desperately searched her mind for the records about souls in the Liuyan clan, but there was no way to repair a soul. What happened? How's Guhan? Song Yifei returned at this moment. You idiot! Have you forgotten what happened when we escaped from Spirited Mountain? In the end, Song Yifei's reaction was faster. After listening to Guhan's desperate situation, Song Yifei immediately remembered the fierce battle that happened a few months ago. What do you mean by escaping from Spirited Mountain? I don't understand what you're talking about at all. Liuyan Ling stared at Song Yifei. I'm sorry. I forgot that it wasn't you, it was Lu Shihua. Song Yifei stuck out her tongue and said seriously, It's very easy to save Guhan now. Find a virgin and have sex with him. Guhan's Green Lotus Soul Guide will repair his soul automatically. This is the only chance to save Guhan. Green Lotus Soul Guide? Isn't this the technique in the legendary 3 Swords of Green Lotus? Why does Guhan know this lost technique? Liuyan Ling said in surprise. You actually know about the 3 Swords of Green Lotus. Didn't the Prime of Tongtian say that this is his trump card? No one in the world knows about the 3 Swords of Green Lotus. Why does it seem like everyone knows about it now? Song Yifei complained, but she did not have much time to think about this. She immediately put her hands under Liuyan Ling's clothes. What are you doing? What do you want to do? Liuyan Ling was shocked by Song Yifei's behavior and asked in panic. What do you think I want to do? Of course, I want to save Guhan. Now, besides you, you are the only virgin here. If you don't give yourself to him, who will? Song Yifei said with a pout. At the same time, she quickly took off Liuyan Ling's clothes. But it's different from what I imagined. My first time with Guhan should be. Seeing this, Liuyan Ling was about to cry. Why are you so long-winded? When I had my first time, I was forced to squeeze in a tent with another woman. Forget it, do you still want to save Guhan? At most, I can catch some girls from outside and save Guhan. Song Yifei said carelessly. Don't even think about it. Those wild women. Forget it, get out of here. Liuyan Ling suddenly drove Song Yifei and the other sword ladies out of the tent like crazy, leaving only her and Guhan in the tent. As for what happened next, there was no need to say anything. Anyway, it was something not easy for children to do. As for the others, they waited outside the tent anxiously, which made the sword-bearers and humans passing by nervous. Did something happen to His Majesty Hongjun? No way. Gohan still hasn't woken up. After waiting for about 3 or 4 hours, Liu Ling stuck her head out of the tent and said to Song Yifei with a flushed face, "I'll go in and have a look." Without saying anything, Song Yifei rushed into the tent. As the tent swayed, Liu Ling's snow-white skin could be vaguely seen. Startled, Liu Ling screamed and closed the tent door tightly. After a few minutes, Song Yifei stuck his head out of the tent. Qi Jian hurried to ask about Gohan's condition, excitedly. Song Yifei shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "There is good news and bad news. The good news is that this method is indeed effective. Gohan's collapsing soul has been stabilized, at least for the time being. There will be no danger of it breaking. But the bad news is that if you want to cure the cold, one virgin is not enough. You need more virgins." "That's easy." Qi Jian stamped her feet and said, "I'll go catch some girls. Gohan lost his life to save them. It's reasonable for them to sacrifice themselves." "Wait, don't be impulsive. It's not that simple." Hearing Qi Jian's words, Song Yifei immediately stopped her and said speechlessly, "Why are you in such a hurry? Even if you catch all the girls, it won't help. Gohan's soul can't be cured by ordinary girls' virgins." "What do you mean?" Song Yifei was dazed. Gohan is Jiandi. If the soul of a human is compared to water, then Gohan's soul is the sea, and ordinary people's soul is just a stream. If we want to save Gohan, the only way is to send water from the sea. If you take water from the stream, no matter how much water you have, it's impossible to fill up the dry sea. Song Yifei made a very vivid analogy. "Speak human language, I don't understand your analogy," Qi Jian said angrily. "All right, if we want to cure Jiandi's soul, only a woman of the same level as Jiandi can do it." Song Yifei shrugged and said, "Just like Liu Ling, only a woman of the same level as Liu Ling can really cure Gohan's soul. Otherwise, it's useless." "Then I'll go find Lu Shihua." Qi Jian reacted quickly and immediately went to find Lu Shihua. "It's too late. Lu Shihua has been taken into Gohan's harem, and she's with me. I feel so wronged thinking about it," Song Yifei said with a wronged expression. Qi Jian was completely dumbfounded. Putting aside the fact that Qi Jian did not know that Gohan had slept with other women, if Lu Shihua could not be used, Qi Jian did not know where to find women for Gohan. There was no other female emperor sword holders in the world for Gohan, let alone a virgin Jiandi for Gohan. Chapter 1571. Ahem, in theory, the sword lady and the girl are the same. Song Yifei couldn't help coughing and reminding Qiudian. "You mean?" Qiudian paused for a moment, then quickly looked at the Xianyuan sword. "Hey! Why are you looking at me? Don't tell me you want me to." The Xianyuan sword's expression was as if it was saying, F***CKU. "Isn't that great?" Celestial exterminating sword rolled its eyes and jumped to Xianyuan sword's side. It bumped Xianyuan sword's shoulder and said, "Don't you always watch those Japanese action movies and shamelessly do it with Gohan in my illusion? Haven't you been looking forward to this day?" "No." "Who said that?" "I." Although the Xianyuan sword was usually full of dirty jokes and had sex with Gohan more than once in the illusion, he seemed to be very open. When this matter really befell Xianyuan's sword, it decisively began to cower. "Oh. So our Miss Xianyuan's sword, the most powerful sword lady in the world, is just a guy who can talk but can't do anything. Humph, so this is her real face." Celestial exterminating sword said with disdain and sarcasm. "Don't think you can fool me with such a simple provocation." Xianyuan sword snorted. "But let me tell you, I'm a woman of my word. It's just a layer of membrane, I don't want it." Without saying a word, Xianyuan sword jumped directly into the tent. There was a rustling sound inside, followed by Song Yifei's screams and Xian Yuan's sword's cries. Then there was moaning, and in the end, it turned into high-pitched screams. After another hour or two, Song Yifei poked her head out. "How is it? Is Gohan better?" Qi asked anxiously. "It's both good news and bad news," Song Yifei said with a pout. "The good news is that the sword lady is as useful as the girl and much more effective. The bad news is that one Xianyuan sword is far from enough. You have to find another one." Immortal trapping sword. Qi did not say anything and immediately set its sights on Gohan's second emperor sword, the celestial entrapment sword. Damn. If it wasn't for Master, I would never have been able to wake up. Just take this as repayment. Unlike the Xianyuan sword's coyness, the celestial trapping sword was quite straightforward and walked straight into the tent. However, everyone could feel that, unlike the Xianyuan sword, the immortal trapping sword did not have much affection for Gohan. Although the Xianyuan sword had been hesitant just now, one could still sense her feelings for Gohan. Otherwise, with the Xianyuan sword's personality, it would have never agreed to such a thing. But the celestial trapping sword was different. When she agreed, there was not much change in her emotions. Perhaps it was as she said, the reason why she was willing to offer herself was to repay Gohan for saving her. Compared to the Xianyuan sword's earth-shattering roar, the celestial trapping sword was very quiet after entering and did not make any sound. If the Xianyuan sword had not suddenly poked its head out of the tent, everyone would not have known that the celestial trapping sword had ended. "Don't say anything. Let me guess. Brother is still not enough, right?" The Xianyuan sword did not speak, but Douyu, who was at the side, pouted and said. Seeing one woman after another go in to have sex with her brother, Douyu's feelings were extremely complicated. "Why, do you want to try it out too?" Xianyuan's sword blinked his eyes on Douyu and said regretfully, "It's a pity that you're Guhan's biological sister. I don't want Guhan to kill me in the future. I can't defeat him now." The Xianyuan sword muttered, then looked at the other three swords of the four celestial slaying swords and said, "Hey, you three sisters, have another one." F***ck, are you kidding me? We're all immortal sword maidens, not emperor sword maidens. We can't use them, okay? The celestial extinguish sword immediately refused. "Come on, everyone knows our background. Although the three of you are nominally immortal sword maidens and spiritual sword maidens, your background is the same as the celestial trapping sword. Alright, Gohan's life is more important. Do you want to return to the hands of the Grandmaster of Heaven in the future? You might as well just break yourself now." The Xianyuan sword smacked its lips and said, "I'll go." The celestial slaying sword was indeed the eldest sister of the four celestial slaying swords. After seeing that the mission had fallen on it, it chose to go into the tent. The celestial extinguished sword, who had been making a lot of noise, obediently shut its mouth and did not say a word. There was no need to guess what happened next. After the celestial slaying sword offered itself, it was still unable to satisfy Gohan's needs. As a result, the celestial culling sword could only go in as a replacement. However, this was still not enough. In the end, the heavy responsibility fell on the celestial extinguished sword. "I'm not going. I won't go even if you beat me to death. I don't want to." Unexpectedly, when it was the celestial extinguished sword's turn, the sword maiden who was usually the most active actually began to retreat uncontrollably. At the same time, it looked around cunningly, as if it was ready to escape at any time. However, the celestial slaying sword understood its own sister very well. Together with the celestial trapping sword, it blocked the celestial extinguished sword's path of retreat and pushed it directly into the tent. "Don't press down. I'm afraid of pain. I heard that this is very painful. I'm afraid of pain." The celestial extinguished sword let out a final howl before entering the tent. Not long after, everyone heard the celestial extinguished sword's painful howl from inside the tent. However, This kind of howl did not last for too long before it turned into a buzzing sound like a mosquito. Towards the end, the celestial extinguished sword did not even bother to hide it and directly began to howl in delight. Its howl was not inferior to the Xianyuan swords from before. They were indeed a pair of unparalleled living treasures. Tian, what do you think we should do if the celestial extinguished sword still doesn't have enough? Qi rubbed its head and asked Tian while listening to the celestial extinguished sword's presumptuous howl inside the tent. You're not going to push me into the fire pit too, are you? Tian looked at Qi vigilantly. I'm different from those perverted women. I'm just an ordinary sword mistress, a standard sword mistress at the level of a treasured sword. Don't count on me. Me too, don't look at me. My relationship with Guhan isn't that deep. I'm a good girl who cares about her chastity. The victorious sword immediately expressed its attitude towards Qi. F***ck, what happened to the promised harem novel? I'll go. I want to save my brother. Doyu jumped up with all her might and raised her little hand high, indicating that she was willing to sacrifice her bones for her brother. However, Qi completely ignored Doyu's existence, causing Doyu to pout in anger. I'll go. Shi Shui, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said faintly. This also shocked the other sword mistresses as they looked at Shi Shui dumbly. Shi Shui, you don't have to. What do you think of Guhan? Qi said hesitantly. Shi Shui was probably the sword mistress who had the worst relationship with Guhan. It was as if Qi had never thought about Doyu or Shi Shui. Unexpectedly, Shi Shui jumped out on her own. It was my mistake back then. If I had worked harder back then and snatched the Qinpin sword from his hands, this wouldn't have happened today. Therefore, the main culprit is all on me. It's time for me to pay for my mistake back then. Shi Shui said faintly, causing the other sword mistresses to be speechless. One more! Song Yifei's voice came from the tent as expected. Shi Shui did not wait for the others to say anything and rushed into the tent first. Her speed was so fast that even Song Yifei was shocked. However, her work speed was even faster. Only 3 minutes later, Song Yifei poked his head out of the tent with a surprised expression and called for the next person. At the same time, Shi Shui, who had put on her clothes again, walked out of the tent calmly. However, from her slightly staggering steps, one could tell that Shi Shui was just forcefully supporting her body. I'll do it! Doyu saw the opportunity and was about to rush into the tent. However, Tian quickly grabbed his neck and threw Doyu into Qidian's arms. Tian said coolly, I'm going to replenish some milk. Then, she walked into the tent. Oh my god, there are only 2 left. Following Tian's sacrifice, only Juzi and Victory Sword did not move outside the tent. Victory Sword did not have much of a relationship with Guhan and always had an indifferent expression on his face. As for Juzi, other than Guhan, no one else could order her around. If it was still not enough, Qi did not know where to find more people. However, no matter how unwilling he was, Song Yifei poked his head out of the tent again. One more. It would be great if he could have another one this time. I guarantee that your man will come back alive and kicking after one more. Song Yifei raised a finger and said, What do you mean by my man? I don't even know how many women he's been with. Qi sighed and looked at Juzi and Victory Sword. Just as it was about to persuade one of them to enter, Song Yifei immediately said, These 2 won't do. Guhan needs one last breath of essence. A normal sword mistress won't be able to fill this last breath of essence. We need a sword mistress who is on the same level as Zhu Xian and the others. Otherwise, it'll be useless no matter how many come. F***ck. That's easy for you to say. Where am I going to find another Emperor sword mistress? Almost all of Guhan's sword mistresses have entered. Where am I going to find a new one for you? Qi was about to cry. Everyone could imagine how much pain and grievance it had to send one woman after another to its man. However, even if Qi Dian wanted to send another woman in, it would not be able to find a suitable one. No. Isn't there another one here? Xian Yuan's sword walked out of the tent and said calmly with the Qingping sword in his hand. Chapter 1572. Will it work if I use her? Qi Jianjian looked at the Qingping sword in Xian Yuan's sword's hand and asked doubtfully. After all, it was this woman who had almost killed her man. Apart from her, no one else can use it. Xian Yuan's sword said with a smile, "Don't worry. With the few of us watching from inside, Qingping won't be able to do anything. Besides, she was the one who caused Gohan so much trouble. Now it's time for her to pay the debt." With that, Xian Yuan's sword walked into the tent with the Qingping sword. Seeing the Qingping sword enter, the 4 fairy-slaying swords nodded at the same time. Then, they each held a part of the Qingping sword's body and injected their power into it at the same time. Under the pressure of the 4 fairy-slaying swords' power, the Qingping sword could not maintain its sword form and could only change back to its sword maiden form in a sorry state. "I know what you want to do, and I know I can't persuade you. There's no need for you to force me. I'll go up myself." To the surprise of the sword maidens, the Qingping sword, who had been saying how much she hated Gohan, had actually taken off her clothes on its own and stood on Gohan, who was lying on the bed. The Qingping sword had said that it hated Gohan so much that it thought they would have to do it directly and forcibly copulate with him. "Don't regret it if I sit on him." Qingping glanced at the 4 fairy-slaying swords. Although her words sounded a little creepy, they thought that Qingping might be bluffing, so the 4 fairy-slaying swords did not stop her in the end. Seeing that no one was stopping her, Qingping sneered one last time, then sat down on Gohan's body, and the two of them became one. "TSK, aren't you taking the initiative? It doesn't look like we're forcing you," Xian Yuan's sword muttered. However, Gohan's body underwent a drastic change at this moment. His originally calm muscles were stretched to the extreme at this moment. Blue veins bulged under his skin. At the same time, he let out a series of crazy and barbaric screams. He looked like a patient who was having a mental episode. "What's wrong? Gohan, what's wrong with you?" The sword maidens were shocked by Gohan's reaction. One had to know that Gohan's previous treatments had been smooth and steady. It had never been this terrifying before. What happened to Gohan? How could it become like this? Ha ha, ha ha. Gohan, you will start from me. You will also die by my hands. Qingping cried out loudly, and then her eyes rolled upwards. Her entire body seemed to have lost its soul, and she became a wooden puppet. But even though she had become a wooden puppet, Qingping still sat ramrod straight on top of Gohan's body. "Oh no, I remember now. This Qingping is not a virgin at all. I actually forgot about this matter." It was also at this moment that Etion suddenly slapped his exposed white thigh and said in an extremely annoyed tone, "What did you say?" "Say it again." Including Qidian, who'd charged into the tent when they heard Gohan's shrill cries, all of them were completely stunned when they heard Etion's words. Qingping is actually not a virgin. How could this be possible? Could it be that Qingping made her sword wielder a cuckold? Most importantly, Qingping was actually Qingpin. If Qingpin wasn't a virgin, then didn't that mean that Gohan's favorite sword maiden, Qingpin, had actually made Gohan a cuckold? No. I should say this. It happened a long time ago, and only Douyu and I know about it. Etion sighed and told them about the past that she'd almost completely forgotten. Where am I? Why do I feel like I've been here before? At this moment, Gohan, who'd completely lost consciousness due to the collapse of his soul, finally opened his eyes again. At the same time, he'd also regained his consciousness, and then found himself in a colorful glass world. That's right. I remember now. This is the Sea of Consciousness, the world of the soul. I've entered that world in the illusion before, and it was also when I faced the Qing Ping sword. Could it be that Qing Ping broke my soul again? Gohan immediately recalled that he'd been immersed in such a sea of consciousness for a very long time when he was in the illusion of the celestial extinguished sword. No, this isn't my sea of consciousness. At first, Gohan thought that he was trapped in his own sea of consciousness like before, but as his senses of this world deepened, Gohan immediately understood that this wasn't his sea of consciousness at all, but the sea of consciousness of another soul. Then whose world is this? Just as Gohan was wondering whose sea of consciousness he was in, a white feather-like thing floated in front of Gohan. Gohan subconsciously grabbed it, and a memory invaded Gohan's mind in an instant. It was a gray world. There was no sky or land in the entire world, only a sea that looked like an ocean. However, it wasn't actually made up of seawater, but a world made up of a strange gaseous liquid. In this extremely strange world, there was a giant that occupied almost 3/4 of the world, curled up like a baby in the seawater that wasn't seawater. The remaining 3/4 of the sea's surface was filled with all sorts of things. There were living creatures that looked like humans, as well as monsters with various animal characteristics. In addition, there were all sorts of strange things such as fans, pagodas, swords, gourds, trees, and so on, floating on the sea's surface. Through the reflection of the seawater that wasn't seawater, Gohan clearly saw the image of a lotus flower. It turned out that Gohan was a lotus flower at this time. When Gohan saw this, his entire memory disappeared, and Gohan returned to that sea of consciousness. Could it be the world before Pangu created the world? After digesting this piece of memory, Gohan immediately realized that the world he saw through his memory should be a world of chaos, without the world created by Pangu. The huge giant curled up in the world was naturally Pangu, who was still in gestation, and the various strange creatures floating in it should be the legendary 88 innate gods and demons. In fact, whether it was Hongjun, Nuwa or Fushi, they were actually one of the 88 innate gods and demons. However, except for a few innate gods and demons, most of the innate gods and demons died in the battle when the world was just created. There were not many innate gods and demons that survived, less than 10. As for the things other than innate gods and demons, they should be innate treasures. According to the memory in the sage relics, innate treasures were born together with Pangu. As for innate spiritual treasures, they were appendages that were born together with Pangu when the world was created. They were not on the same level as innate treasures. It seems that this memory is Qing Ping's memory, and Qing Ping should be that lotus. Gohan finally figured out the ins and outs of this memory. At the same time, another goose feather representing the memory floated to Gohan, and Gohan entered the next memory of Qing Ping. In this memory, the world was still in the chaos, and Pangu was still in a deep sleep. Just when Gohan thought that this was a repeat of the memory, a crack suddenly opened in the primordial world, and a figure in blue entered the chaotic world through this crack. Last night, I thought hard and didn't expect to find such an interesting thing. I'll create it first to test the waters and see if I can get the favor of the higher-ups, and see what the creation of this world is like. The figure in blue said with a grin, looking quite indifferent and playful, as if creating a world was just a joke. Then, this figure took out a pen from his pocket and directly threw it into the chaotic world. As this pen entered, the originally silent world began to boil violently at this moment, like a pot of boiling water. Pangu, who had not been breathing, also began to breathe rhythmically at this moment. All right, leave a mark, and this will be the world I rule. In the end, the blue figure used his finger to write some sort of symbol in the air and left it in this world. After the symbol was finished, the blue figure suddenly glanced at Gohan's position. Although the other party did not make any obvious movements, with just a glance, Gohan could sense in horror that the other party seemed to know of his existence. Heavens, this was not Gohan traveling to the past, but Gohan absorbing Qing Ping's memories. This was something in the memories, so how did that man see him? What shocked Gohan even more was what happened next. After this memory disappeared, Gohan immediately began to copy the blue-clothed man's actions and began to write the symbol he left in this world. After he finished writing the symbol, Gohan's eyes immediately widened. This symbol was actually the emblem of the Lunyan clan. This was the unique symbol of the Lunyan clan. This man is actually related to the Lunyan clan. Is he the Kanzu fleeting calendar? This was Gohan's guess at first, but he quickly denied it. Gohan had seen the fleeting calendar several times, and this was not the temperament of the fleeting calendar at all. That man felt more like an ordinary person filled with laziness. His true temperament was not even a millionth of the fleeting calendar's temperament. In the following time, Gohan saw many more of Qing Ping's memories, including how Pangu split the heavens and earth, and how the lotus was taken away by a primordial fiend god after the creation of the heavens and earth. Only the 2 lotus leaves of the lotus were left behind. In the end, these 2 lotus leaves were picked up by an elegant man. In the end, the 2 lotus leaves turned into a cyan longsword in the man's hand. This man was naturally the sect leader of Tongtian, and the cyan longsword was the Qingping sword. There were many more memories after that. They were the memories of Qingping sword and sect leader Tongtian, the memory of sect leader Tongtian being imprisoned by Hongjun, the memory of sect leader Tongtian killing sect leader Tongtian, the memory of sect leader Tongtian fighting against her senior and junior brothers, and finally the memory of her accepting sect leader Tongtian's order and spending time with the flowing sword ancestor. Fleeting calendar, return my father to me. When Gohan saw this memory, he could not help but burst into tears. This was the Qingping sword's memory, but it was also the fleeting calendar's memory. The person who wanted to kill the fleeting calendar the moment they met was none other than his precious daughter, Gu Xuanwu, who had been separated from him for over 1,000 years. Gohan finally saw his biological daughter again. However, Gohan did not expect to see his daughter in this way. Chapter 1573. As this was the memory of the Qingping sword, Gohan could only view it from an awkward angle. After all, the Qingping sword was placed on fleeting calendar's waist, so Gohan could only view it from a 45-degree angle. The moment Gu Xuanwu appeared was when fleeting year calendar had barely managed to crawl out of the rubble of his house with the Qingping sword. He was about to go to the museum to save his mother when Gu Xuanwu descended from the sky and pressed his sword against fleeting year calendar's neck, implying that he was going to kill him for revenge. Fleeting time was helpless. He had no idea how he had offended the beautiful girl, causing her to be separated from her father. As a shut-in, fleeting time rarely stepped out of his house. How could he do such a thing? Fleeting time was a man who rarely went out of his house, so there was no way he would do such a thing. On the other hand, Gu Xuanwu was determined to kill fleeting year calendar for revenge. Helpless, the Qingping sword could only take the initiative to transform into a sword lady to block Gu Xuanwu. At the time, Gu Xuanwu was only a famed sword-rank swordsman. Although the Qingping sword was only an ancient sword, its swordsmanship came from the Jie sect's direct line of swordsmanship. Gu Xuanwu was not a match for the Qingping sword at all, and was quickly defeated by it. Although fleeting calendar felt very sorry for the girl who suddenly jumped out to kill him, he quickly forgot about it and rushed to Hubei province's museum, hoping to save his mother. However, fleeting calendar arrived too late. The museum was already destroyed, and fleeting calendar's mother had become food for Steel Tooth. Seeing fleeting calendar appear, Steel Tooth naturally targeted fleeting calendar. Unfortunately, the Qingping sword was unable to help fleeting calendar because it had already used the Jie school's swordsmanship once. Fleeting calendar, who did not know any swordsmanship, was no match for Steel Tooth, and was about to die at Steel Tooth's hands. In his panic, fleeting time calendar touched Yu King Gojin Jian, whose glass barrier had been shattered. He successfully synchronized with Yu King Gojin, and then Yu King Gojin jumped out and used his powerful sword skills to kill Steeltooth and save Fleeting Time Calendar's life. In the following few days, Fleeting Calendar lived like a zombie due to his mother's death. He relied on the Yu King Gojin to fight on his own to survive Yuan Ko's attack. One day, when Fleeting Time Calendar was passing by a ruin, he unexpectedly met Gu Xuanwu, who had once tried to kill him. However, Gu Xuanwu was not in a good condition at that time. She was surrounded by 4 nether-rank bandits, and was about to die. Fleeting Time Calendar disregarded the past and volunteered to fight alongside Gu Xuanwu. However, this was still not enough to defeat the 4 Nether Realm Yuan Ko. In the end, Gu Xuanwu had no choice but to teach Fleeting Calendar swordsmanship, so that Fleeting Calendar could fight with the Qingping sword while Yu King Gojin fought. Fleeting Time lived up to his name as the sword ancestor of the generation. Gu Xianwu had only taught him a little, but Fleeting Time was able to comprehend many basic swordsmanship techniques. He even created a few unique moves. Finally, after a bloody battle, the two of them successfully killed the 4 Nether-class bandit. Because Fleeting Calendar had saved his life, Gu Xuanwu could no longer kill Fleeting Calendar. At the same time, in order to repay him, Gu Xuanwu told Fleeting Calendar many basic settings of the Sword Lady and the Sword Wielder. This allowed Fleeting Calendar to understand the relationship between the Sword Lady and the Sword Wielder, allowing him to use the Sword Lady perfectly. From then on, Gu Xuanwu did not want to have any contact with Fleeting Calendar. In the end, he parted ways with Fleeting Calendar. However, through this fierce battle, Fleeting Calendar was able to walk out of the shadow of his mother's death. He swore to his mother's spirit in heaven that he would one day kill all of the Yuan Ko and return peace to the human race. For a long period of time, Gu Black Tortoise's memories did not appear. Fleeting Time Calendar then established a survivors' camp in Wuhan City and found some of his fellow swordbearers. After a series of adventures, he brought these survivors to Yanjing City. At the same time, Fleeting Time Calendar once again met Gu Black Tortoise in Yanjing City. This time, Gu Xuanwu opened her heart to the Fleeting Calendar and told him that she came from the future. She was kicked into the past by the Fleeting Calendar from the future, and was separated from her father. As for what happened in the future, as well as Fleeting Calendar's identity as Kanzu, Gu Xuanwu did not tell Fleeting Calendar about it. Gu Xuanwu's words made Fleeting Calendar feel guilty. Although Fleeting Calendar did not know why he would do such a thing in the future, Fleeting Calendar expressed that he was willing to use the rest of his life to make it up to Gu Xuanwu. He said that he would do his best to help Gu Xuanwu find Shizaki Keizo, who came to this world with her, and then let Shizaki Keizo send Gu Xuanwu back to the future. And so, the following days were filled with stories of Fleeting Calendar and Gu Xuanwu fighting side by side and protecting the old Yanjing City. During this adventure, the Fleeting Calendar and the Gu Black Tortoise had formed a deep friendship. Gu Han could clearly feel the love between the Fleeting Calendar and the Gu Black Tortoise from his memories, but it was gradually becoming more and more passionate. To Gu Han, seeing his own daughter in love was an indescribable feeling. He actually felt some blessings, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a little sour. What made Gu Han even more jealous was that Gu Xuanwu had taught Fleeting Year Calendar everything he knew about the 9 swords of mysterious heaven and the chaos sword art to Fleeting Year Calendar when he almost died because of his swordsmanship. As a result, Fleeting Year Calendar's swordsmanship gradually entered a whole new realm. During this adventure, Ying Zheng appeared for the first time. Fleeting Calendar and Gu Xuanwu rescued Ying Zheng, who had just reached adulthood and had yet to fully recover his strength, from the hands of a group of Yuan bandits. At that time, although Ying Zheng had revealed the cunning and treacherous characteristic of an emperor, it could be seen that Ying Zheng was still a good person. After a series of adventures, he took the initiative to reveal his identity to Fleeting Calendar and Gu Xuanwu. After a narrow escape from death, the three of them swore an oath of brotherhood in the peach garden and became sworn brothers and sisters that would never leave each other's side. After that, the old city of Yanjing was besieged by Yuan bandits' army. Fleeting Year Calendar and Gu Xuanwu fought with their lives on the line, while Yingjing used his unique strategic vision as an emperor and commanded the battle from the shadows. At that time, the strongest person was not Fleeting Calendar, but Gu Xuanwu. This was because Gu Xuanwu's talent in swordsmanship was not inferior to Fleeting Calendar's. After studying Gohan's swordsmanship, Gu Xuanwu's swordsmanship reached 1/4 of Gohan's current level. I mean 1/4 of Gohan's swordsmanship when he was at his peak. Therefore, at that time, the old Yanjing city formed a situation where the Black Tortoise outshone others and suppressed all the heroes. Because of his powerful strength and beautiful appearance, Gu Xuanwu became the goddess of the entire Yanjing city. She was admired by countless famous swordsmen in history. Of course, Gu Xuanwu's heart was always with Fleeting Calendar, and it never wavered. Gu Xuanwu was getting stronger and stronger, but the situation on the battlefield did not change. On the contrary, the government officials who were afraid of the power of the swordsman began to have some ideas that they should not have. They decided to create some special equipment to control and suppress the swordsman, so that they would completely obey the government's orders. What was worse was that these officials even secretly captured many swordsmen and swordmistresses. They planned to dissect them to find out the origin of the swordsman's power, and then find a way to copy it into their own bodies. This plan was carried out in secret. Thanks to the heavy casualties on the battlefield, the disappearance of some of the swordsmen did not arouse any suspicion. However, this matter was eventually discovered by Fleeting Calendar. To ensure that this secret was not discovered, the government decided to make Fleeting Calendar disappear as well. They planned to dissect this powerful swordsman in the underground base. However, Fleeting Time Calendar was, after all, a man blessed by the heavens' luck. After Gu Xuanwu and Yingjing found out the truth, the enraged Gu Xuanwu single-handedly killed his way into the base and killed most of the government officials, saving Fleeting Time Calendar from the brink of death. However, with the destruction of the government and the destruction of the upper echelons, Beijing City's defense line was completely destroyed. It could be said that the old Beijing City's defense was largely due to Gu Xuanwu. If not for Gu Xuanwu's massacre, the old Beijing City would not have fallen so quickly, and Gu Xuanwu had offended many swordsmen whose family members had died in the battle. After that, the two of them went through many adventures. Finally, in the fleeting time gap, under the witness of countless sword-bearers, they became husband and wife. After that, Gu Xuanwu became pregnant with Fleeting Time Calendar's child. And through the Qingping Sword's perspective, Gohan saw his own daughter and Fleeting Calendar's sweet life. Originally, Gohan thought that this memory would pass just like that, but at some point, before Gohan and Fleeting Calendar could react, Gu Xuanwu suddenly disappeared from the world, and disappeared without a trace. In the memory of the Qingping Sword, Fleeting Calendar had been wandering around the world in search of the missing Gu Xuanwu. It was during this process that Fleeting Calendar finally found the Empyrean Sword and became the first Emperor's Sword in human history. Chapter 1574. One day, just like how Gu Xuanwu suddenly disappeared, Gu Xuanwu suddenly returned to Fleeting Calendar's side. She was carrying Fleeting Calendar's son in her arms. Fleeting Calendar was overjoyed, but after spending some time with Gu Xuanwu, Fleeting Calendar could vaguely sense that Gu Xuanwu seemed to have gone through something very exciting. She was no longer the same as before. Not only did the fleeting year calendar feel strange, it also attracted the attention of Gu Han, who was a bystander. Even through the memories of the Qingping Sword, he could tell that Gu Xuanwu was indeed different from before. Just as Gohan was about to carefully observe what would happen next, the Qingping Sword's memories suddenly became extremely blurry and unstable. It was as if a powerful external force had interfered with the memories. Guhan could no longer get a complete set of memories. He could only see some fragmented images, like a disk that was being fast-forwarded at 64 times the speed. With such fragmented memories, Guhan could only barely understand a few things. The fleeting year calendar seemed to have discovered some important secrets and began to secretly investigate these secrets. The relationship between the goo-black tortoise and the fleeting year calendar became more and more entangled. Eventually, the two of them lived in separate rooms and never lived together again. Guhan did not know how long the fragmented memories went on, but the scene in front of him suddenly stabilized. At this moment, he saw a scene that shocked him to the core. At this moment, he was stabbing into a woman's body, and this woman was none other than his beloved daughter, Gu Xuanwu. The person holding the sword hilt, other than the fleeting calendar, who else could it be? Later on, fleeting calendar was jealous of Gu Xuanwu's fame and strength, so he secretly ambushed her and injured her. She had no choice but to flee for her life. In the end, she hid in a coffin that I prepared for myself for 3 years. Guhan suddenly recalled the story of Gu Xuanwu that Ying Zheng had told him. All this while, Guhan had thought that Ying Zheng might not be telling the truth. Kanzu was a kind and benevolent person. He would never do something like that. Ying Zheng was telling the truth. Fleeting calendar had indeed injured Gu Xuanwu. However, Guhan did not expect that the sword that pierced into Gu Xuanwu's body was his own Qinpin sword. His own Qinpin sword was stained with his daughter's blood. Unexpectedly, Gu Xuanwu did not put up any resistance against fleeting calendar's attack. Instead, he allowed fleeting calendar to stab Qinpin's sword into his body. At the same time, he looked at fleeting calendar with a face full of tears. Perhaps it was the tears that moved fleeting calendar's heart, but he finally let go of his killing intent towards Gu Xuanwu. After pulling out Qinpin's sword, he left without even turning his head back. Just as Guhan was anxiously preparing to see the next memory, Guhan saw a face that seemed to have gone mad. The owner of the face had used Emperor's Sword of Firmament to slash at Guhan's body. Guhan let out a blood-curdling scream and was immediately plunged into darkness. Looks like this is what Qingping said about me being discovered by the sword ancestor and being broken into two. Guhan immediately understood that the story of fleeting calendar and Gu Xuanwu had come to an end. When Guhan found a new memory, his youthful face had already appeared in the memory. He was in the familiar but no longer in existence sword burial ground. He was holding himself, and next to him was the young Liuyan Ling, who was lying on the ground, unable to move. Therefore, Guhan began to appreciate his own life from the perspective of Qinpin's sword. He re-witnessed many of the stories and memories of his life. Some of these memories were so vivid that even Guhan himself had almost forgotten them. However, they appeared so vividly in front of Qinpin's sword. This is... When the memory progressed to a dark house, Guhan immediately became excited. Of course, Guhan remembered this house. It was one of the houses in Fort Yuyang. At the same time, it was also the place where Guhan had lost his first time. However, even now Guhan still didn't know who had taken his first time. He saw himself burning with lust because of the 3 swords of the Green Lotus. His body was in so much pain that it felt like it was about to be burnt. I'll do it. I'll save my brother. The first to jump out was actually Doyu. The little girl had actually stripped herself naked in a few moments and tried to sit on this body. This action gave Guhan a huge fright. If Doyu had really sacrificed herself to save him, then he might have broken his own bones. Fortunately, Doyu didn't succeed in the end. This was because Heavenly Sword had jumped out in time and blocked Doyu. Heavenly Sword usually looked like a somewhat drunken woman, but she still had her own principles when it came to worldly etiquette. Of course, she couldn't just stand by and watch this tragedy unfold between her brother and sister. Don't stop me. If I don't save Big Brother is dead for sure. Doyu shouted as she struggled. When Heavenly Sword saw Doyu struggling like this, she could only smile bitterly and say, "Forget it, I'll do it. It wasn't easy for me to come out, I can't just go back like this." Could it be that my first time was given to Heavenly Sword? Although Etienne was a little hesitant, she still took off all her clothes and was about to sit on him. Guhan was a little surprised. However, this was something that Guhan could accept the most. Giving his first time to Etienne was definitely more suitable than giving it to the other two. As for Qingpin, who was Guhan's point of view, he coldly watched all of this. Guhan could feel that the one in control of Qingpin's body wasn't Qingpin, but Qingping. That was why Qingping could look at him so coldly, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. "This is your mission." Suddenly, Guhan heard Tongtian's familiar voice. Then, Guhan felt his entire memory tremble. His sword's point of view, which was originally lying on the ground, instantly flew into the air and became a human's point of view. "Go away." Under Tongtian's order, Qingping pushed Heavenly Sword, who was already riding on her, away. Meanwhile, Doyu and Heavenly Sword looked at her vigilantly and asked, "Who are you? Why did you come out of Qingping's body?" Cut. Qingping didn't answer Doyu and Heavenly Sword's order. Instead, she directly used the secret technique of Jie School, causing Doyu and Heavenly Sword to pass out in an instant. What followed was a scene that was not suitable for children. After that, the restless Guhan finally calmed down. As a warm thing entered Qingping's body, her body began to change violently. Qingping's body actually changed like flowing water, which easily covered the entire floor. On this floor, 2 green lotus leaves, one big and one small, floated quietly on it. A small lotus flower was slowly blooming against the lotus leaf. Is this the true form of Qingping's sword, the lotus leaf? But why? Why is there a lotus flower here? Wasn't that lotus flower taken away by ancestor Hongjun a long time ago? Just as Guhan was feeling a little strange about the appearance of this lotus flower, it suddenly pounced towards Guhan, who was a bystander, and flew directly into Guhan's consciousness. Guhan's vision went black. He actually fainted in Qingping's consciousness. "Qingpin! Black tortoise! Qingpin!" Accompanied by his own scream, Guhan suddenly stood up, and saw a ray of warm sunlight shining in from the outside world. "Guhan! You're back! Guhan! You scared us to death!" At the same time, a soft body instantly pounced into Guhan's embrace. Just from the familiar warmth in his embrace, Guhan knew that there was no one else in his embrace except for Qidian. "Brother!" Immediately after, Doyu also pounced in with a smile, and then complained, "Brother, these people are so bad, I wanted to sacrifice myself to save you, but I can't." "Me too. At least I paid the price in blood." Seeing Doyu, who did not sacrifice anything, also pounced into Guhan's embrace shamelessly, Xianyuan immediately pressed on top of Guhan's body, a little jealous. All right. Can you let me calm down? My mind is a little messy right now." Helplessly, Guhan moved the 3 slightly heavy bodies away from him, and then said to them with a serious expression. Seeing Guhan's expression, the sword maidens obediently shut their mouths, and let Guhan think about it. "You guys, did you use that method to save me again?" Guhan felt that his soul had become more tenacious and heavy, and that his body was full of red marks, and suddenly felt a little annoyed. "What? After getting such a big bargain, do you still want to wipe your mouth and not admit it?" Extinguish Immortal Sword said snappily. "I'll admit it. How could I possibly not?" Guhan immediately said firmly. What a joke! If Guhan dared to go back on his word at this time, Guhan's own sword ladies would kill him. "That, the last one with me, was it Qingping?" Guhan suddenly asked in a somewhat silent voice. "It's her, but how do you know?" Qidian handed the Qingpin sword back to Guhan's hand and said, "We didn't expect that Qingping is actually not a virgin anymore. I thought it would harm you, but I didn't expect it to help you instead." When you woke up, she had already changed back to this appearance, and. At this point, Qi Dian suddenly stuttered, as if it didn't dare to finish the rest of the sentence. And she seems to have turned into a normal sword, no longer has any spirituality or soul, and is no longer a sword maiden, right? Guhan held the Qingping sword in his hand. His expression was as calm as a piece of cold jade. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.